Hello, everybody. It's me, Schluge, and I'm back with another reaction. And yes, we're back with something I'm finally ready to start doing again. We're back with Animarchy history, and we are here with their newest video. Could the Germans win the Battle of Britain? Now, let's get all the Hearts of Iron campaigns me and Cry have done where we did it successfully. That was different because we were cheesing it and we were being goofy. But yeah, now we're going to actually see if statistically. Now, basically, this is a really tough subject for any historian because this is a very slippery slope. But we're going to tackle it. But before we watch this video, make sure you like and subscribe, turn on notifications, follow me on all my new social medias, including my new Blue Sky, because we're abandoning Twitter for good reason. And if you want to keep supporting this channel and keep giving my adorable Labrador Koa cookies, please go join my YouTube membership. Also, real quick, everybody, so recently my girlfriend Ven's been going through some rough times. If you'll look down in the description, you'll find a link to a GoFundMe for her. I would really appreciate it if anyone could donate anything. I mean, literally anything helps. But anyway, we're here to watch some Animarchy history, so let's get into it. I already see Lambda and Mead. Good to see you again. Okay, let's get this video started, shall we? Let's get this video started in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Dova? Dova. Oh, I hear them. Oh, here they come. The Luftwaffe is coming. Bro, what the? Oh, look, the blubbering walrus. Bro, how is a single Panzer III holding the blubbering walrus? That's unrealistic. There's your first inaccuracy, Animarchy. There's no way a Panzer III could carry the blubbering walrus. You're gonna need at least a rat.
G'day, everyone.
Oh, wait,
Welcome
that's
to
you.
England.
Why is that you?
Now, I know you have several questions, but allow me to address what I assume to be the main ones. A. Why are you standing on the cliffs of Dover as German bombers fly over?
Yeah.
B. Why are you dressed as Hermann Goering squeezing himself into the turret of a Panzer III?
Yeah!
And C. Why are you blatantly ripping off not just the intro, but the entire style of the legendary Australian Rainbow Frog YouTuber Martin Cedopan 6 months after H-Bomber Guy nuked half the platform's biggest creators for plagiarism?
Just one small problem!
Well, allow me to answer those questions in reverse order.
Okay.
First, why am I using Martin's style? Well, quite frankly, I'm a fan. My Zoomer countryman is hysterically funny. However, more importantly, while rewatching his KSP series, I realized something. I was actually learning rocket science. And I'm not a STEM guy, I'm a history guy.
Yeah.
This little was making me learn things without my consent. The nerve.
The
cheek
fucking nerve of him.
Thus, I had a revelation.
Whoa.
If he can teach a bunch of monkey-brained miners to activate their singular neuron via video games, then surely I would be able to teach history the same way. This then begets the next question. What game should I use? Well, like every other history creator on this platform, the expectation is, of course, to use Hearts of Iron 4. However, the fact is that this game has the depth of a puddle, the complexity of a hammer, and the community around it is half made up of people who don't shower, while the other half has very questionable politics one way or the other.
And what if me and Cry? Me and Cry are nothing of this. Oh my god. Bruh. And I'm sorry, but I love taking showers. I always feel nice after a long stream and taking a shower. Feels good. The nerve. The cheek of this Australian. Us Americans bathe.
No. We need something much, much more autistic.
Really?
We need weapons-grade autism.
No!
We need tabletop gaming autism.
Oh.
Introducing Gary Grigsby's Eagle Day to Bombing the Reich. And it is, to this day, the most complex simulation of aerial warfare at the strategic and operational level ever made. This game walked so that Command Modern Operations could run, and even then it is still vastly superior in some areas. It models every single factor from production to maintenance to pilot fatigue, all the way down to individual combat conditions, what altitude the aircraft are at, what angle they are in relation to each other, their speed and their range. Even the specific tactics and doctrine they use are all simulated, and it does this for the entirety of the Western theater of operations during World War II. But taking on the role of Arthur Death Cab for Dresden Harris, or Curtis Napalm Sticks to Canto LeMay, or even Carl Spit on That Thing Sputz, is way too big for a single video. So I'm not going to do the combined bomber offensive of the Allies. I am instead going to take the role of everyone's favourite overweight art-collecting morphine addict and command the Luftwaffe in the Eagle Day
And
scenario.
blubbering walrus.
Thus, humble viewers, I present to you the answer to the other two questions. For today, I'm going to teach you how Germany lost the Battle of Britain and how I went about winning it. Welcome to Operation Channel Storm, defeating the RAF with modern air power doctrine. The shenanigans will be many, the decisions will be questionable, and the history will be learned. This isn't a threat, it's a statement.
Jesus.
So without
okay.
further ado,
Bro, you're shooting
Eggplant.
Browning. Egg?
Engage.
oh, and by the way, don't worry, I'm not going to do the whole video in Martin style because that would be actual plagiarism.
Yeah,
and
don't
I
do
have
that.
way too much respect for him to do that. Not to mention, copying someone else's style just puts your audience to sleep.
Exactly.
You know what
it's
else can help you get
lazy.
to sleep? That's right, it's time to fulfill my contractual obligations. This video is sponsored by Mantis Sleep, makers of the
Well,
world's
while
best
the ad
sleep
is going, Coa's at
Look,
the
as a
door.
YouTuber,
I'm gonna
I
just
am,
let
by
the
the
ad
definition
roll
of
while
my
I let
job,
him outside.
permanently online. It's become a meme
BRB.
on my friends' streams that I don't have a sleep schedule, and believe me, I don't. But I managed to survive somehow, and that somehow is napping. Mantis Sleep is the world's largest proponent of napping. Taking a nap will help you get through the day. Trust me, I don't drink coffee or energy drinks, so it's the only way I survive mine. But in the modern world, napping is hard. It's all noise, it's all stress. There are a million distractions that prevent you from getting any sleep at all, let alone a nap. That's where Mantis Sleep comes in with their masks. They have a full range of products for any of your needs. There's even one with a Bluetooth speaker in it for audiobooks. It's great. I personally, though, went for their weighted mask. It blocks everything out completely and is just really, really comfy. And check out how well made it is. And this strap is fully adjustable for any head size, which for my Funko Pop looking head is a feat in of itself. The eye covers, though, are the real star, and each mask has its own variant. You can get sinus-clearing steam ones or cool, refreshing chilled ones. These ones have extra padding. The range is insane, and it blocks all of your problems out and helps you get the perfect sleep. So, if you want to get that quality sleep, click the link below for a 10% discount off your card at checkout using my promo code here on screen or in the pinned comment below. And now, without further ado, back to the video.
Part 1. Planning, doctrine, and a lack of intelligence. Indeed.
Okay, for those of you who've been here before, you know what time it is. But for everyone else, all of my videos start with a history lesson. Hit it!
1940. Europe is
Now,
a
in a
mess.
twist no one was expecting, not even the Nazis, Germany has, through a comedy of errors on the Allied side and sheer balls-deep insanity on the part of General Erich von Manstein, who got absolutely no credit for it, defeated France and is now enjoying a comfortable early summer on the sandy beaches of the Channel coast, joyriding around in all the vehicles the British so kindly left behind for them at Dunkirk. Now, to quote former President of the United States and certified GOAT, General Dwight D. Eisenhower,
Damn right.
plans are worthless, but planning is everything. And the meaning of that statement is extrapolated from another old military adage, derived ironically from the founder of the German General Staff, Helmuth von Moltke.
Good old Moltke.
No plan survives first contact with the enemy.
Oh, yeah.
The meaning behind both of those sentences is essentially that the battlefield is so chaotic, while war itself is inexorably complicated by so many factors, that making a plan, only for it to get derailed, will render you paralyzed at the decisive moment. Thus, the logical conclusion is to make contingency plans for literally every single outcome you can think of, allowing you to instantaneously react to the changing operational conditions as the need arises. This system of pre-planning and wargaming was first properly codified in the modern sense by the Kingdom of Prussia, carried over into the German Empire. Military philosophers like Clausewitz and the aforementioned von Moltke pioneered this approach due to Prussia and later Germany having one of the worst strategic situations in Europe and perhaps the world. Surrounded by enemies, no safe access to international trade,
Yeah.
and no secure access to critical natural resources vital to waging industrial warfare. Oil, rare metals, surplus food production, etc., etc., etc. This meant that Prussia and later Germany would have to wage quick, decisive wars against one enemy at a time while diplomatically maneuvering around the other powers.
Yeah.
They had a war plan for every single scenario, and later under the Kaiser they even had a fleet in being which could, and to an extent did, challenge the Royal Navy for the...
And there's the boy. BRB. One sec. Quickly. Hang on. I'm coming, Koa. I'm coming. Mr. Needy Boy. All right, continuing.
the control of the surrounding sea lanes. At least until 1918, when they mutinied and then got blown up in Scotland.
Yeah.
Now, given that Germany's strategic and economic position hasn't really changed, and given that with this heritage, their professional officer corps, and their military culture, you would expect the Germans to have plans in place for this exact situation, this exact contingency, and that the full might of all three branches of the Deutsche Wehrmacht is prepared to unleash a typhoon of destruction upon the British Isles. Nope. You see, after the end of World War I and the subsequent rebirth of Germany under amicable Adolf and the Windmill of Friendship, the idea of waging war directly against the British Empire was simply laughable.
Yeah.
With the loss of the High Seas Fleet and the economic strife of the interwar period, such a conflict was considered, quite rightly as it turned out, an exercise in self-termination. But as the 1930s progressed and the diplomatic position with Britain became ever more hostile, it became apparent that war plans needed to be drawn up to at least fend them off long enough to win the war on land. The Kriegsmarine, to that end, originally pursued various classes of commerce raiders and fast battleships,
Yes.
such as the Deutschland-class pocket battleships like
Which
Graf
repeat.
Spee and Admiral Scheer, the gruesome twosome Scharnhorst and Gneisenau, the Admiral Hipper class like Prince Eugen, and of course,
Okay, yes, Bismarck class, we get it.
the
we
idea
get it.
was these 30-knot, heavily armed, highly maneuverable surface ships would run away from the Royal Navy while shooting up trade convoys as they went. At the same time, Dönitz and his underwater Übermensch in their shiny new U-boats would sneakily sink the remaining cargo vessels, strangling the United Kingdom's economy and forcing them to terms. But there was a glaring flaw in this plan, which I'm sure you can see. Warships are expensive, and they
Very.
take a long time to build. Furthermore, it doesn't matter how fast you are, the North Atlantic is over here, and Germany is here. The keen-eyed observers among you will note that the British Isles and its main naval base, Scapa Flow in Scotland, right here, are ever so slightly in the way, meaning the only method you can use to get there is by sneaking past, which, by a clever process of elimination, makes the U-boats the only logical option.
Yes.
Which is exactly what Dönitz said. Did they do this?
No.
Of course not. Because fascists, by the nature of their ideology, need to make their dicks look absolutely enormous.
Yep.
And they adopted Plan Z.
It's evil. It's diabolical.
It's absolutely stupid.
This Plan Z can't possibly fail.
That meme never gets old.
No, it really
Anyway,
doesn't.
They
Even though I
decided to
hate
build
SpongeBob,
a
that
whole
meme
new
never gets
high
old.
seas fleet from scratch in a country recovering from an economic
So
crisis.
that is the first thing I do when I
With
want
a
to start
shortage of
Britain.
fuel
I just,
oil
I
and
just
rare metals
abandon Plan Z and go straight
against the
to
largest navy in the
U-boats.
world, using the exact same plan as last time.
Yeah. I get like
God,
1,000
Nazis
U-boats
are
right
stupid.
in 1939.
And it gets
I just
even worse,
starve
because
England.
Admiral Raeder, the guy who came up with this plan, told the High Command and the Reichschancellery that this plan would only reach its completion phase by 1942 at the earliest, meaning they couldn't go to war with Britain reliably until then. And all of that assumed that Britain would just sit and watch them build aircraft carriers and battleships bigger than Yamato, by the way, and not do anything about it.
Animarchy, I kind of have to step in on this one. Chamberlain. I'm pretty sure that guy. I'm pretty sure if Germany did not touch Poland, he would have let them go right along their merry way and do whatever the fuck they want. The only reason he really declared war on Germany was because he was obligated to. He didn't want to, but he was obligated to. So yeah, I have to disagree with you on this one. I think he would have let them get away with literal murder. He probably was.
Because the construction of the High Seas Fleet definitely didn't lead to a naval arms race prior to World War I being partly responsible for the entire conflict, and the
If
interwar
Churchill got
period
in office after
definitely
Chamberlain,
didn't
like,
have a number of
without
very
any issues.
controversial
Oh, yeah,
treaties
Churchill was
trying
it,
to
but not
pronounce another one,
Chamberlain.
which definitely didn't trigger another naval arms race resulting in the largest warships ever built. God, seriously. Look, Drakenfell has an entire anthology on this topic, which you should go watch. But the thing is,
I don't know.
you
That's
can't
just my
even
personal
defend this
opinion.
decision by claiming 2020 hindsight. Because the
Fair.
plan had its critics at the time, and everyone knew that a stand-up fight with British Home Fleet would result in their utter annihilation by sheer weight of numbers, not to mention their better crews and their air superiority at sea
Yeah.
via the fleet air arm. In fact, the campaign in Norway, which I did a whole video on if you're interested, demonstrated that aside from the occasional lucky break, like the sinking of HMS Glorious, every time the German surface fleet met with the Royal Navy, they were repeatedly battered into submission.
Wars might make
With all those
happy
factors
noises.
taken into account, controlling the international trade lanes and defeating the British at sea wasn't going to be an option. Therefore, the only option really was to leverage air power. Bring up the map once again. Yeah. There's a bit of an issue there too.
Yeah.
But Animarchy, I hear you cry. They are based in France. And yes, this is true. But you have to keep in mind that even in their wildest dreams of success, even in all of their pre-war calculations of various strategic and operational outcomes, no one in the German High Command could even fathom the Wehrmacht destroying the entire armed forces of all of Western Europe in the span of 6 weeks, occupying the continent. The idea that the Luftwaffe would be operating from the French Channel coast with absolute impunity was so out of the realm of possibility that no one even considered its implications. This meant that any pre-war plans for an air war against Britain would have to be a long-range strategic air war. Enter General Walter Wever. He was the leading proponent of the Luftwaffe being an independent fighting arm of the military, a fighting arm capable of flexibly adjusting between all three primary roles of combat power application: strategic, operational, and tactical. Upon the initial establishment of the Reichsluftfahrtministerium, or the German Air Ministry, but it's way more fun saying the full thing, General Wever was the man assigned to command the technical division. Later, when the Luftwaffe itself was formed, he was appointed as its chief of staff. Now, it should be said that while he agreed with men like Sir Hugh Trenchard, who advocated for strategic air power, that being large fleets of heavy bombers striking at targets in depth, Wever had a very modern and forward-thinking view on how the Luftwaffe should be developed. He viewed the primary role of the Luftwaffe being to destroy the enemy air force above all else, on their airfields, in the air, and on the assembly line. But what separates him from the other strategic air power proponents is that he was part of the generation of German officers pioneering combined arms warfare and the doctrine that would colloquially be known as Blitzkrieg. So, while he wanted to have a strategic air arm, the primary doctrine for it would be to attain air superiority, and then once this was achieved, he wouldn't focus on industry or terror bombing, as conventional doctrine dictates. Rather, he would focus on interdiction strikes. His heavy bombers would switch from destroying airfields and aircraft factories to destroying railway hubs, fuel depots, naval dockyards, warships, and enemy assembly areas for their troops, while the fighters would range over the battlefield and fire into the enemy's territory using drop tanks or two-engined long-range escorts. What he was developing essentially resembled a beta version of air-land battle, the main combined arms doctrine employed by NATO during the 80s and 90s. The same doctrine they used for Desert Storm. I think you can see where I'm going with this.
Yes.
General Wever had outstanding ideas. His planned Ural bomber, yeah, real subtle there, buddy, would grant the Luftwaffe a strategic bombing capability. The fighter arm would have longer-range air superiority fighters to complement the interceptors like the Bf-109. The Wehrmacht would be able to not just defeat the enemy air force, but unravel their entire battle plan at the operational level with precision interdiction strikes on all their lines of communication, allowing the Panzer divisions complete freedom of maneuver to exploit breakthroughs with impunity. So, we know this didn't eventuate. So what happened? Well, straight up, it was pretty simple. He died. While taking off on a routine training flight in his private aircraft, he mishandled the takeoff and stalled at low altitude, crashing in a huge fireball at the end of, ironically enough, Dresden Airport's runway.
Oof.
Turns out God does have a sense of humor. Therefore,
Yeah,
with his
sick and
death,
twisted.
replacements had to be found for the Chief of Staff and the Technical Department at the Air Ministry. Those replacements were Albert Kesselring and Ernst Udet, respectively, both of whom were avid close air support proponents,
Yes.
especially Udet, who had recently been an observer at U.S. Army Air Corps exercises, where he had witnessed Curtiss dive bombers being used to great effect. Meanwhile, Kesselring and Erhard Misch, head of aircraft production in Lufthansa, were proponents of the Schnellbomber, or fast bomber concept, pioneering high-speed medium bombers to perform interdiction strikes and close air support near the front line while outrunning enemy fighters. This meant the entire plan for the Luftwaffe as an independent arm was abandoned in favor of complete integration with the army as what amounted to flying long-range artillery. The medium bomber programs would bring about the Dornier 17 and the Heinkel 111, while the dive bomber program spawned the famous Ju-87, aka the Stuka. And as for everything else in the development pipeline,
And there's a
including
Ju-88,
the
my
strategic
favorite.
bomber project, Udet said that all of them had to be able to dive bomb, because that's what the Luftwaffe was for, it's close air support, therefore they've got a dive bomb. This ended up delaying the Ju-88's introduction, an excellent aircraft, as well as increasing its weight and, by extension, decreasing its speed by at least a third, meaning it was no longer a Schnellbomber. And as for the strategic bomber, it became an abomination,
Oh,
an
the
affront to
HE-177.
God and man.
Oh.
We don't talk about the Heinkel 177 on this channel,
Oh.
ever. But for those who are curious, its nickname was the Luftwaffe cigarette lighter. You can draw your own conclusions on its reliability
Yeah.
and flammability from there. The irony of this whole episode, though, is that this situation would actually work out very well for the Germans early in the war, as heavy bombers are expensive and hard to produce at scale. Just look at the B-17.
Oh, yeah.
Plus, when you consider the smaller size of the Luftwaffe, not to mention the fuel shortages that would plague them later, they most likely wouldn't have been able to mount a strategic bombing offensive of sufficient scale to achieve their goals anyway. So in the end, the cheaper-to-produce tactical bombers was a better option, and they allowed for a larger and more effective air force to be fielded at the start of hostilities in 1939. Had Weber's plans been put into place, they most likely would have had similar issues to the Kriegsmarine. All this stuff to build, and not enough time to build it. But there is an unforeseen consequence to all of this. Without a strategic bomber force to carry out a strategic air campaign, no one at the Luftwaffe planning department had bothered to actually study the possibility of fighting one. So when the Germans suddenly found themselves at the English Channel in 1940, the only plans that had been made for an air war against England were a couple of half-hearted studies done in 1938 based on the idea that they would launch from Germany, which, due to not having a strategic air force, they concluded that waging an air war against England was impossible, as their bombers, even if they were based in France, wouldn't have the range to reach all the targets in the British Isles they'd need to hit in order to win. Nor could they carry enough bombs to do enough damage anyway. Worse still, all the information they had on the RAF was incorrect or out of date. They didn't know which bases were fighter bases or bomber bases, and that's if they even knew the base existed. Because after the Munich conference and the collapse in diplomatic relations, even their sneaky recon missions with Lufthansa commercial flights didn't work, as they were being heavily monitored at all times. So half the forward bases for RAF Fighter Command weren't even on their maps, nor were half the private aerodromes or the social flying clubs for the well-to-do that they could use as alternative fields. However, they did know about the radar network. Contrary to popular mythology about the Battle of Britain, the Nazis knew very well about radar, and in fact, they were actually more advanced at the time.
Oh, yeah,
This
big
would, of
time.
course, change after British scientists invented the cavity magnetron, which revolutionized the entire field, giving the Allies an unassailable lead in radar tech, but prior to the war, The Kriegsmarine was already experimenting with fire control radar for their ships.
Oh yeah, the Bismarck
Aviation
had
applications were also in the
it
works
was
at the
knocked
time.
out, though, by
What
firing
they
our own
didn't know,
guns.
though, was how exactly the RAF's radar systems worked. Nor did they know how it was implemented into their command and control plans. No one had ever developed an integrated air defense system before, so the Germans had no idea it even existed.
Correct.
And finally, they didn't even know what frequencies the radar stations operated at. Thus, the beginnings of an electronic warfare campaign were being considered. Yet without the operating band, they wouldn't be able to lock in a countermeasure for their radar network. So, in 1939, as war was on the horizon, the German airship Graf Zeppelin flew up and down along the British coastline, officially on sightseeing flights and training operations, while actually being filled with ELINT equipment, searching for the correct frequency bands. However, they avoided several of the lower frequency bands because they were their communications frequencies, and they didn't want the survey and scanning equipment to interfere with them. Plus, all of the German radars operated at the mid to high frequency range, so obviously we don't need to worry about the lower end of frequencies anyway. Which is a shame, really, as low frequency radar sweeps were exactly what the long range chain home transmitters were operating on. Meaning the Luftwaffe flew up and down the coast of the British Isles, desperately trying to find out how British radar worked, while filtering out or ignoring exactly the transmission types.
All they had to do
were
was
looking
turn on
for.
their radios.
And even after they captured France, none of their intelligence guys thought to check again to see if this situation had changed. Also, side note, I wonder if having lots of really hot electronic equipment next to a ton of hydrogen is wise.
Okay.
You know, electronic equipment that could have, like, static shocks and shorts and, Anyway, if we can't gather intel using ELINT equipment or
Leave
make
Zeppelins
plans
alone.
based
We
on
need to bring them
doctrine or known
back,
quantities,
seriously.
we will have to rely on spies.
But use helium this time, not
There is
hydrogen.
just one teeny
Helium.
tiny problem with that. German intelligence is absolute dog shit.
Yes!
And there really is no other way of putting it. To prove this point, I could get away with just citing the famous examples. Operation Double Cross, for instance, had our main man Garbo invent an entire pantheon of supposed Nazi agents in the United Kingdom, while the actual spies were either caught or turned into double agents. This was so effective, in fact, that not a single German agent successfully infiltrated the mainland United Kingdom throughout the entirety of the Second World War. But naturally, I'm going to use the funnier one. And the funniest one is most definitely the fact that the man responsible for training every single agent the Abwehr sent into the Soviet Union was one Pyotr Pryatko, who was a Soviet spy.
Yep!
And when those agents were sent, they were sent to join the primary resistance movement to Stalin, a movement wanting to restore the Russian monarchy and overthrow the Bolsheviks. Except this entire organization was run by the NKVD, later known as the KGB. Seriously, German intelligence was just that bad. But it's appropriate I actually begin this paragraph by talking about Russia, because in this case, I get to use their catchphrase. Seeing as, guess what? Say it with me now. It gets worse. You see, the problem with running oppressive, mass-murdering empires is that you need selfish, callous, and monstrous types of people to get the things you want done. Thus, dictatorships like Nazi Germany are always under threat of being overthrown or destroyed by ambitious members of the regime who are just as ruthless as their leader. Now, some leaders, such as Joseph Stalin, deal with this problem by using terror to keep his subordinates in line, while the closest advisors are all entirely
No, that was
lackeys
the
or yes
NKVD.
men.
The KGB
Anyone
was
who
later
shows even the slightest hint of individual initiative gets shot as a threat. This is great for the dictator, but as you can imagine, its effects on the quality of governorship are detrimental. Soviet casualty figures, the Gulag, secret police, its economic performance data, and the average living conditions speak for themselves. The best and brightest of society can't do anything to improve matters either, due to the politically corrupt bureaucratic nightmare of the system, or the fact that if they do rise above that issue, getting gulagged or shot is the reward.
Yeah.
Reference my Russian aviation video for how that goes.
Still waiting for part
Hitler,
2.
however, had a different method. Divide et impera. Divide and conquer. You see, instead of terrorizing the talented and empowering the spineless, he used a far superior, yet still fundamentally flawed method of control.
And downright evil.
In that method, you keep all the highly intelligent, talented, and ambitious people you need to achieve your objectives and run things effectively, but instead of giving them autonomy to carry out their missions, which could potentially allow them to amass a power base to challenge your leadership, You give them overlapping authority and assign them to the same jobs simultaneously.
Yep.
Everyone will be far too busy fighting each other for power to even think about coming after yours. But even better than that, when they inevitably run into an impasse or have a big argument, they end up calling the dictator themselves to resolve it, thereby
Yep.
legitimizing your rule. This simultaneously allows you to control everything while keeping all the talented people on staff working their hardest. And
Man, this sounds familiar, don't it? An egotistical, maniacal, like, cult of personality wannabe making all the intelligent people around him compete for positions and power and affection. Where have I heard this before? Where have I seen this before? Because, I mean, none of that exists in the modern area. You know, like a guy with an ego the size of fucking Mount Everest, just making all the intelligent people dance like stupid monkeys in front of him in hopes of entertaining him to stay in power. Where have I heard this before? I'll just say this, Mickey. He's one of them. But there's more. There's a lot more than just Putin. Oh, what I wouldn't give for a fucking F-117 with an unlimited spending budget at this point. Continue on.
And as an added bonus, the need to endlessly ask Daddy for conflict resolution turns all those talented people into yes men. Your yes men.
Uh-huh.
So what's the downside? Well, when you have all these talented, powerful people in charge of their own departments, the constant political infighting turns them into politicians rather than leaders, meaning half of that talent you cultivated goes to waste. Yet even more damaging is the side effect of that.
Can we also just point out how, like this is supposed to... Look how fucking... I always love this. He's the true Napoleon complex. Look at this shit. See, Napoleon actually stood on average size with his men. Look at this shit. What a fucking pathetic piece of shit. Man, killing him in Zombie Army yesterday was fun. Maybe I'll do it again tonight. I don't know.
The monolithic Nazi Reich to last 1,000 years is not a monolith. It's 15 to 20 different feudal kingdoms in a trench coat who are all trying to kill each other.
Again!
Which
Where have I heard this before?
Branch of every branch of the Third Reich's government is its own self-contained unit. So, Germany during World War II didn't have just one intelligence organization. Oh no. It had several, with each one reporting to their own boss. First, you have the Abwehr, who ostensibly worked for the military high command and was the air quotes official military intelligence service. They reported to Admiral Canaris, who was a traditional conservative type and secretly working with Britain.
In reality, Stefan, yes he was. Napoleon was really fucking average height. But then again, I think the whole thing was, remember, the French peasantry was starving half the time, so their growth might have been stunted. That's just a theory. I can't prove if it's true or not, just my own personal theory on it as well. Plus also, let's also face it, the British are smug jerks. Let's just be honest.
Britain while trying to overthrow Hitler, while also trying to stop the communists.
Yeah.
Then there was the Sicherheitsdienst, or the SD. They, along with the Gestapo, are the SS intelligence branch, the real fascist bastards.
Oh, yeah.
And they report to the Reich Security Main Office under Reinhard Heydrich, who in turn works for Heinrich Himmler.
Yeah.
You then have the OKW Intelligence and Cipher Branch. They technically work for the German High Command, but the OKW is basically a US Joint Chiefs equivalent, except not really, that reports directly to Hitler rather than actually running the military. They're kind of like their own separate thing. They're more a political body for Hitler to control the military with rather than an actual High Command, so they are technically separate. And of course, all the independent military branches have their own intelligence wings as well. The Army and the Luftwaffe each have one, while the Kriegsmarine has several, because B-Dienst was split into multiple departments, with one such department specifically reporting to Dönitz and the U-boat arm. And of course, they've all got their other departments based on region, etc., etc., etc. You get the idea.
Man,
And
all
this
these
sort of
intelligence
structure
agencies
applies
are not a brain
to
cell
the
among them.
entire German military and economic apparatus during the Second World War. There is an independent branch competing with another independent branch for almost every single thing the Third Reich does. There are multiple departments for literally everything, all fighting each other for power and resources, with the only person able to settle disputes between them being the overall superior officer in charge, the supreme one of those being Hitler himself, who half the time either offers a compromise that doesn't work, see the reserve panzers on D-Day, or doesn't understand anything about the problem he's being asked to arbitrate, i.e. using the Me-262 as a bomber, the entire existence of the Mouse tank, the Stalingrad airlift, etc., etc., etc. You get the idea.
Yeah, move on,
However,
please.
the funniest part of all of this is the Nazi Party itself had a spy agency as well.
No shit.
The Forschungsamt, or the research section, which was camouflaged inside the Reich's Air Ministry, reporting to Hermann Goering himself.
Christ almighty, a political group...
Marshal, baby!
You mean the blubbering walrus? And Jesus fucking Christ, a political branch with its own spy agency? Fuck me, are we in trouble? God almighty, nobody tell either of any political parties nowadays that they could do this shit. Oh, wait a minute. Fuck, they did. Fucking Watergate, now that I think about it. Fuck. Oh, people ask me why I don't get into politics. I'll tell you why.
Had his own private spy agency.
What?
At this point, I'm going to let you all ponder a very rhetorical question. Did any single one of these intelligence agencies share their intel, cooperate, or even talk to each other?
Let me guess. Let me think. No. No, they didn't. Fucking A. Christ almighty. By the will of the Emperor and the flying fucking spaghetti monster. Oh. This is why I honestly am starting to think intelligence agencies. I'm sorry, here's what I just have to say this. Intelligence agencies nowadays, be it the CIA, the KGB, MI6, whatever the fuck the Chinese have going, they're all fucking useless. They're all still trying to play Cold War Risk, but they're just... Honestly, I think if anybody needs to get fucking defunded, it's all the world's intelligence agencies. Let's put up a track record before somebody says, "Oh, if you defund the CIA, the KGB, the FSB will do something." Fuck that. Them FSB assholes are too busy with their own shit. I've already shit on Putin so much. I am literally blocked in Russia. This channel is blocked in Russia. I haven't had Novichok in the mail. I haven't had any FSB guys show up at my house. I'm still breathing. I'm not cooling my heels in Siberia. They're fucking useless. Oh my god. I swear to God, you know what I honestly think? I think that American Dad is not a fictional show. I think it's a one-to-one documentary on what the CIA actually fucking does. And the morons who fucking work in the CIA. Fucking A. Oh, could the CIA be any more fucking useless? Continuing on.
Each other.
Oh yeah, I'm blocked in Russia, Miki. I checked my channel, like, this video is partially blocked. Where? Russia? Why am I not surprised? And it's all my history videos. They're all partially blocked. I'm legal everywhere else, but the only way you can see me in Russia if you got a VPN. If anyone in Russia is watching this on a VPN, please rise up against Putin. You have the power. You did it against the Tsars. You can do it again. Oh, fucking A. Continuing on.
Of course not. So even if we managed to get spies into England, and even if they were able to get information on fighter command bases and their deployments, and even if they managed to get that information back to Germany, There is a 90%
Of course I'm
chance
wearing
that
it like
the
a badge
get
of
that
honor.
information wouldn't relay it back to Luftwaffe High Command. Or
Who
that
do I
the
look like,
information would be
Nike?
fragmented
I don't
throughout several
kiss
different
ass.
agencies,
Not in this channel.
with nobody being able to collate it. And even if that information got back to Luftwaffe High Command, fully collated and organized, against all odds, the intelligence officer responsible for interpreting it is a self-serving, politically sycophantic, and completely incompetent wanker by the name of Beppo Schmidt. A personal friend of Goering, and a man so focused on looking good for the boss that he practically invented half the intel reports he gave, and woefully misrepresented the other half. To give you an example of the epic incompetence of bumbling Beppo Schmidt, the most notable instance of him getting things wrong was getting called out by Adolf Galland during the Battle of Britain for presenting kill claims against the RAF that make Russian Air Force kill claims look modest by comparison.
Oh, yeah.
And for those of you who don't know, during World War II, the Red Air Force often overclaimed in excess of 300%. And in the current conflict with Ukraine, they've claimed to have destroyed the entire Ukrainian Air Force at least 4 times. But
Can I also just say this? Like, lately we've been getting reports. I say, like, oh, Russia's gaining ground and and such. I'm like, okay, yeah, they're gaining ground in inches. I'm like, what the fuck? All this shit is just getting ridiculous. All this shit. Like, I love the people, oh, Russia's winning. Gaining an inch does not... It's like, Russia gains an inch, Ukraine takes a mile. Oh, but also in taking that inch, Russia loses how much? Like, that's like, what is the cost of an inch? What is the cost of a mile for Russia? And most importantly, why are North Korean troops showing up in Russia to fight in Ukraine? If Russia's winning, why do they have to call it fucking North Korea? Let me answer that. To any of the Russia stands in here, the Russian supremacists, please, do tell me why North Korea is needed to fight in Russia. Yeah, from what I've heard, Kursk is holding, but they're losing little bits of it. But $10 says that was probably what the Ukrainians were planning. Now that the Russians are focusing on taking back Kursk, they've stripped troops from other more strategic sectors to defend the motherland. Yeah, from what I think, like, the whole Kursk offensive was mainly just kind of more of a distraction to both ease off some more important sectors that Ukraine wants to take, while also stripping more troops away from Russia. So yeah. No, Mead. Wedgies is too good for them. We just need to mock them. Oh yeah, no, exactly, Miki. Yeah, North Koreans were sighted in Russia. Oh, I love irony. I love the so-called, like, bully, like, oh, we love bully nations. I'm like, yeah, bully nations are fucking losing. It's a shame. It's such a shame to get your ass handed to you so hard. And nowadays, I'm not even worried about Ukraine because, get this, the U.S. isn't even the biggest supplier of weapons and munitions. South Korea actually took that over. South Korea's given more artillery shells than we are now. I wonder why. Let's continue on, though. We're talking about Battle of Britain, and we're only 30 minutes in. Jesus.
by the number of aircraft they've supposedly shot down. So yeah, German intelligence was that bad.
Yeah.
Alright, so that rules out spies. That only leaves us going back to the fundamentals of the operational military art. Formulating an operational concept, narrowing down key objectives to achieve the overarching strategic aim. The Luftwaffe can at least do that, given their practical experience in Spain and the early stages of the war. Surely, they can do that, right? This is the fourth time I've done the rhetorical gag. No. The answer is no. They can't. For the simple reason that the leadership is currently ransacking the Louvre for its art collection, or getting higher than the recon flights he hasn't ordered. And with the Oberkommando der Luftwaffe flagrantly uninterested in the planning process for the air war against England, an air war ordered by Hitler himself to prelude an invasion codenamed Operation Sea Lion, Goering has delegated the entire operation to his subordinates, which is a problem, because the formations below the Oberkommando der Luftwaffe are the Luftflotten, or the air.
Well, I've tried to make OG content, and believe me, I've actually done more of a streaming stuff. So, hey, APTPG, or I'm just gonna call you App. You mind that? You mind if I call you App? Like, when it comes to OG content, like, here's the thing. I just enjoy reactions because they're fun. And for the most part, I like just talking about this history stuff because it also brings up some interesting content. It's both me think of it like a conversation between two historians. He knows some stuff, I have my stuff, and we both share our own opinions on it. So it's more of a discussion rather than a reaction, or a quite mixture of both. As for OG content, keep an eye out on my channel more often. I do streams, and I actually have interesting conversations with friends around similar topics. So yeah, keep an eye out. Honestly, yeah, just keep an eye out. I've tried making my own OG content, and plus, I've also done my own top 5 videos. So yeah, honestly, like I said, people, look through my channel. I've done different things. I have different interests. Be sure to check under both video and live to see all the other cool shit. Yeah, there's something for everybody here. I do reactions because they're fun and I like doing them. Plus, it also is it's an experience for me to learn just as well as teach and have some fun. It's just fun. Let's continue on.
Fleets, which are similar to Soviet air armies in that they are allocated to a regional or frontal command rather than a theatre command, meaning that the air war against England was being planned not by the operational staff of the Oberkommando der Luftwaffe under Goering, but by each individual air fleet assigned to the campaign based on their region.
Welcome. I am a reactor. I know I'm the bottom of the fucking barrel. Believe me, I know I'm the bottom of the barrel of YouTuber content. I know I am the literal, what is it? There is full on content creators, streamers, analysts, discussion channels, politics, and then at the very, very, very bottom of the barrel, there are reactors. Believe me, App, I know. But yeah, we basically but these videos are mainly here to just discuss history. God, Tribal, shut up. I'm kidding, I love you, Tribal. But yeah, I just make funny videos and we just discuss cool shit. Plus, everyone likes seeing me react to certain things and discuss my own viewpoints of history. It's fun. I kind of view it as a way to interact and and discuss with fans about history and stuff like that. It's interesting subjects, and plus I'm interested. But in all honesty, if anyone ever told me to stop, if Animarchy or Laser Pig or anybody else told me to stop reacting to this, I would. Anyway, continuing on.
They're all in different places. Those being Luftflotte 2 in the Calais region, Luftflotte 3 in the Normandy region, and Luftflotte 5 in Norway. And they were basing their completely different plans on the intelligence provided by the aforementioned incompetent Beppo Schmidt, who in turn based his ruinously inaccurate reports on the low-quality and badly fragmented intelligence gained prior to the war. The only thing they had to fall back on was a 1930 guidebook to industry in Britain, and the early air war studies done in the 1930s, which all said the same thing. We can't win an air war against Britain. But the all-conquering Luftwaffe had vanquished all of Europe, so obviously the master race can...
Here's the big thing. Here you go, App. Here's a little discussion I have. To beat Britain, to actually conquer England, there are many issues when it comes to the invasion of Britain. First of all, to invade Britain, it's not that it's impossible, but it's the invasion of an island. Basically, the biggest defense England will always have is the fact that it is an island. The island is the ultimate strategic point, because if you are surrounded by ocean, that gives the enemy an extremely difficult task to get to. Because on the water, transporting equipment over water is extremely risky. Ships can be torpedoed, bridges can be blown up. It is extremely dangerous, risky, and difficult. And the biggest thing when it comes to England at the time is how do you transport all that equipment over to England? And the biggest thing was, when in the case of England, air superiority. That is the crucial factor in this. Germany needed to maintain air superiority. That's what they were hoping to accomplish with the Battle of Britain. However, they couldn't. And I know probably Animarchy's going to discuss this right off the bat in the video, but you know what I'm going to say right now? Basically, the British had superior fighters. They had a superior intelligence as the number one fucking thing. And the fact is this. Here's the thing. Germany could have eventually whittled down the RAF, but they couldn't. They didn't have the resources to do it. The reason we were able to maintain air superiority over the English Channel for Normandy was because we spent time and we had ample access to resources we need. Specifically, the biggest resource we needed, that any army needs nowadays, well, or even at this time, oil. Oil was the biggest thing they needed. Germany had little to no access to oil. Whereas the Allies, we made deals with literally everybody. The Russians, the United States had a huge supply. Later in the war, the Saudis came over to our side and started giving us oil, which I won't discuss right now. The biggest thing that Germany lacked to maintain a prolonged conflict with England to maintain air superiority was fuel. That is the crucial clincher here. The plan, in terms of Operation Sea Lion, like, I've read it, it's not bad. It's a plan. It's a plan, that's all I'll say about it. And really the whole plan was, the major issue was getting over to Dover and taking, basically they basically did the reverse of what they thought Patton was going to do on D-Day. They thought he was going to go to Calais. So, because Calais and Dover is the shortest passage. That was the plan. Maintain air superiority and then launch a landing invasion from Calais to Dover, take the port of Dover so that way ships could get turned in and drop off their cargo, and then take the country as planned. That's literally what everyone's done. Yeah. So, the biggest thing, though, with this is the reason that the Battle of Britain failed was Germany looked at this and said, we don't have the oil or the fuel to maintain this. Because what did Hitler have cooking up in the works that he desperately needed that oil for? Barbarossa. That was the biggest fall of it. Hitler needed Britain to fall fast because he needed the fuel to invade the Soviet Union. Which is why everyone calls Operation Barbarossa the nail in the coffin for the Third Reich. Germany lost the second Barbarossa was initiated. Back to the subject, because Tembuck says Animarchy is going to cover exactly everything I just said.
Prevail. I mean, hell, Beppo says that the RAF only has 200 fighter planes left after their disastrous defeat in France, so we should easily be able to crush them. And so, preparations for the battle began in earnest. In fact, the RAF had 600 modern fighters available, and a Canadian newspaper salesman has managed to organize Britain's factories to produce at least 100 new Spitfires and Hurricanes per week. All the while being able to return any damaged aircraft back to service.
Look up the
within
Spanish
48
Armada,
hours,
right,
depending
AP?
on how bad a shape it's in. Fast forward a few weeks, new airfields have been built on the French coast.
Yeah.
The artistic heritage of Europe has been utterly devastated. The supply of chocolate eclairs in Paris has been preemptively purchased, and Hermann Goering has called a meeting of the various command staff to discuss their plans. When he got there, Kesselring and Speerle, the commanders of Luftflotten 2 and 3 respectively, presented two completely different plans for defeating Fighter Command. Initially, they had tried attacking the supply convoys in the English Channel to bait them into a trap. but Air Chief Marshal Sir Hugh Dowding saw through them, only committing his squadrons one at a time on hit-and-run attacks against the bombers. Every time the Luftwaffe fighters tried to engage, the RAF...
There's also one other thing I forgot to mention, that because I just gotta say this because it's in my head. The other thing that the Germans did wrong is they underestimated the stubbornness of the British. Those fuckers, they're like, oh, if we bomb London, they'll fall apart, their people become demoralized. Oh no, that just pissed them off. There are very few people that will fold if they're getting attacked. 90% of the people that, if they're attacked, they will stand back up and they will punch back harder. So, yeah, there's also that. And the fact that the British were literally using everything for airfields. Seriously, go look up the battle, here's a big thing. Go look up the Battle of Britain, and you'll find British, using old flying clubs or tennis courts or shit like that for airfields. So yeah, really, for every airfield they bomb, they just let's transfer the squadrons to the South Seas Flying Club or just this little luscious field or some shit like that. Fucking British. They tighten their belts so fucking tight they got the thinnest waist in the world. It's about you could barely fit a fucking quarter through it.
Fought a defensive action and then withdrew. This left the Luftwaffe only one other option. They would have to attack targets the RAF would be forced to defend in strength, which is what both these new plans suggested. Mm-hmm. The issue was what targets they wanted to bomb. Airfields and radar stations featured in both, but that's where the similarities ended. Luftflotte 2 planned to attack British aircraft factories to delay production and steadily allow them to gain air superiority over time, while Luftflotte 3 argued that a determined offensive on London would force the RAF into the air for destruction. And of course, there were also plans for their usual tactics. Terror bombing, destroying the ports of southern Britain to prevent trade, attacks on various different political targets like Parliament House in Westminster or Buckingham Palace, and even a plan for using the Luftwaffe to help the U-boats in blockading Britain.
Big time!
Despite the fact that Goering prevented the creation of the Fleet Air Arm because he wanted all the aircraft in Germany to belong to him, which then led to him refusing to release his Focke-Wulf 200 Condor squadrons to the Kriegsmarine for that very reason. So no one in the Luftwaffe knows how to bomb ships, not really. Yet despite all of that, the most insane thing of all of this is neither plan factored in perhaps the most important variable.
Oh yeah, there's that.
The Royal Navy.
There's that too.
Which is the actual barrier to the strategic goal, that being invading Britain. Destroying Fighter Command is supposed to free up the airspace for them to be able to sink the Royal Navy if it attempts to stop the invasion. Except neither plan offered a cohesive operational concept for destroying either Fighter Command or the Royal Navy. Their plan was basically throw bombers at something, shoot down the British, and then magically win.
Yeah.
Never mind that the British pilots can just bail out and get a new plane. Never mind that your own analysts told you the Luftwaffe doesn't have the bombers to mount a strategic bombing campaign, either in type or quantity. Never mind your fighters don't have the range to escort the bombers into the industrial heart of Britain, being the Midlands and the North, making any attempt to hit them far too costly to contemplate. And never mind that you have no idea how the RAF defense system actually works, so you have no idea how to shut down what was the very first integrated air defense system in military history. An integrated air defense system they had no idea even existed. But to hell with it. They were going to try. August 13th was selected
German
as
over-engineering at its finest.
Eagle Day, the beginning of Operation Adlerangriff, the attack of the Eagles. What General Weygand called the Battle of France is over.
More like chicken hawks, am I right?
The Battle of Britain is about to begin.
Really? Really, Animarchy? Really?
Having read the title of this chapter, I'm pretty sure you can speculate what my strategy going into this battle is going to be. But first, we have to establish some key foundational information. First, the simulation assumes that I have supreme command of all branches of the Luftwaffe. Essentially, I am what the pilots of the Luftwaffe refer to as the Fat One. Which is accurate.
The blubbering
sadly,
walrus.
thanks to sitting at a desk for the past decade. But at least I'm high on caffeine instead of morphine, so we've
Yeah,
got that
that's
going.
fair.
for us.
That's fair.
Next, the simulation rightfully assumes that I have fired Beppo Schmidt and transferred him to the Luftwaffe Arctic Weather Station located in northern Norway. So our intelligence information is now a lot more accurate. Also, I should mention one of the unrealistic aspects of this game, as fighter pilots don't exaggerate claims and bomb damage estimates are generally speaking accurate, so it's not really true to life in that sense.
Yeah.
Although, that being said, it does model the fact that recon flights are required to be flown in order to update the status of targets hit, as well as to confirm the disposition of fighter command. Ergo, I am going to need to gather my own intelligence and build my own intel picture from scratch. I need to locate the RAF fighters, where they are based, and how their forces are deployed. Historically, this was very difficult for the Luftwaffe, as attempts to photograph RAF air bases were met with ruthless interception, preventing them from gathering intel, adjusting their strategy, or accurately tracking damage done to their various targets. But I have two ways of getting around this. First, every raid I send will have recon aircraft interspersed with the formation, ensuring up-to-date photos of RAF airfields and radar stations on a regular basis. And second, recon missions conducted deep inside mainland Britain will be carried out by Bf-110s and Ju-86 high-altitude recon aircraft, not the standard recon units. This will limit my information gathering capacity to a certain extent, but a lone Bf-110 stripped of its guns flying at 33,000 feet is a lot harder to catch than an HE-111 flying at 20,000.
Yeah,
and I can't
that's
get
smart,
recon
that's
photos
smart.
if the plane carrying them ends up as a Dorsetshire lawn ornament.
Uh-huh.
With regular recon flights over all the airfields in southern England and regular raids on both sector airfields and the radar network, I should have a complete intelligence picture on the combat disposition of fighter command. However, as the saying goes, knowing is half the battle.
Yes.
The other half...
Extreme violence.
Extreme violence.
Now, as we've
to see
established,
my
the
fellow
biggest
VTubers.
problem for the Luftwaffe is the lack of an overall operational concept. But seeing as I am the Supreme Commander, aka the Reichsmarschall baby, and I have supreme
The
executive
blubbering
power because some
walrus.
bohemian corporal threw a baton at me, I can actually coordinate the entire operation according to my strategy. And with that, ladies, gentlemen, and that Technicolor rainbow in between who will just love our obsession with lederhosen and leather hiking shorts, I welcome you to Unternehmen Kanal Sturm. Alright everyone, listen up. The operational concept is simple. Step 1. Destroy the British IADS. Step 2. Destroy RAF Fighter Command. And Step 3. Obliterate Great Yarmouth. If we accomplish these three things, our invasion of Great Britain...
Why is Okay, I need to do research on Yarmouth, because this is the second time I've heard the hatred of Yarmouth. Like, it's here, and and Hunter the fucking parenting. What is it with Yarmouth? Is Yarmouth just like is Yarmouth like the Detroit or the Los Angeles of fucking England? What the fuck?
can commence in earnest. As we speak, the top minds in the OKW are developing revolutionary new methods of bringing our troops to the cliffs of Dover. We don't actually have any landing craft per se, or any amphibious assault ships at all, actually, and half our navy was sunk in the Battle of Norway, but this shouldn't pose a problem. According to recent reports, every single river barge and rowboat in the canals of northern Germany have been drafted into the Kriegsmarine for this glorious operation. And with the destroyers we have left, and some of the merchant vessels we stole from the French, we should be able to tow our boys across one of the roughest international shipping lanes in the world, next to an island famous for shit weather. Failing that, though, our Kameraden in the army have been working closely with our Kameraden in the U-boat arm to develop a revolutionary amphibious assault capability. Unterseepanzers. We hydraulically seal up a division of tanks and drive them ashore underwater using a snorkel. We are reliably informed that this has absolutely limitless combat potential as soon as we can get enough volunteers to try it. And the second wave of volunteers will have to recover the first wave. Breaking character for a second, all of this is actually absolutely true.
Yeah.
Germany only had one dedicated amphibious landing vehicle. Literally one. A singular prototype with no testing. Satu, eins, ichi. Just a single one. So they planned the entire invasion to use towed barges, regular cargo ships, and literally whatever they could grab that floats.
Gallipoli,
Any of you who
anyone?
have seen the Top Gear special where they try to cross the English Channel in amphibious cars can probably guess how that's going to go.
Yep.
And as for the underwater tanks,
Oh no.
yeah.
Yeah.
What's even crazier is they saw combat in Russia for crossing rivers, except they ran into the slight issue that enemy shell fire undermines water tightness somewhat.
Yep.
But that didn't stop them from trying again. After all, you can't keep the Aryan race down. Their plan to get the Tigers across rivers, because they were too heavy for bridges, was again to turn them into U-boats. It's whack, and fraught with misadventures.
Just a quick question though: if you turn a Tiger tank into a submarine, does that mean that the Tiger crew gets U-boat badges? Just a thought.
For more fun information about the plans for Sea Lion, I recommend the book We March Against England by Robert Fortune. Though you might want to put on your anti-Veraboo glasses for it, as it can get a bit ridiculous here and there, and makes a lot of assumptions that, frankly...
That's... The D.D. Shermans were different. You see, the D.D. Shermans were designed to float. These things were just like, well, we can't get to float, so let's have it go along the bottom. The D.D. Sherman, and here's the biggest difference, some of the D.D. Shermans actually fucking worked! This shit's just insane!
I am dubious about. Or, if you'd rather I do a more in-depth video on Operation Sea Lion at some stage, drop a like and leave a comment telling me so.
O Panzer of the English Channel, what is your wisdom? Don't try this fucking bullshit!
Also, subscribe too if you can.
Oh yeah,
And
I
if
never
you are
said it
so
was a
inclined,
practical idea, but I
subscribe
did say
to my
like
Patreon and give me money.
I did say, here's what I'm saying: the DD Panzer, unlike this monstrosity here, that actually worked. None of these worked. Was it practical? Hell fucking no. Did it work though? That's a leg up than this.
So I can, eat and pay bills and stuff. But suffice to say, even if the Germans won, and even if we win, Operation Sea Lion was logistically and operationally impossible, and
Yep.
it would never have worked. Just look
Why
at what
did-
was required to get D-Day to work,
Oh,
and even
yeah.
that hung in the balance for a few days. Anyway, back to the matter at hand.
That's why they wanted
that
to get
being
Dover
defeating fighter
so
command.
badly.
And that starts with step 1. Cut a hole in the box. I mean, destroy the IADS. But Animarchy, I hear some of you ask, what is an IADS? IADS is an acronym. An acronym
shit.
for a term I have already used in this very video. IADS stands for Integrated Air Defense System. That being a system which integrates all the aspects of a nation's air defense. Wow. Wild, right? In the case of Battle of Britain historiography, it's usually referred to as the Dowding System or the Park
Yeah.
Dowding System, named after Air Vice Marshal Keith Park and Air Chief Marshal Sir Hugh Dowding, commander of 11th Group in southeast England and the head of Fighter Command respectively. Also, to quickly expand on the various RAF fighter groups in England, 11th Group controls southeast England and the defence of London. Their main airfields are Kenley and Biggin Hill, supplemented by North Weald, Northolt, Hornchurch, Debden and Duxford. 10 Group
Yes.
covers the western half of the country, with their primary base being the best-named airfield in human history and my favourite airfield ever, the immaculate, glorious and iconic Middle Wallop. God, it's so fun to say. RAF Fighter Command Base, Middle Wallop. They also have St. Ival covering the far west near Plymouth, Fillerton covering Bristol and Cardiff, while the coastline is guarded by Tangmere, which, funnily enough, is the airfield my grandfather served at as a radar technician.
Oh shit, cool.
However, emotional sentiment won't save it this time. Then, if you move all the way up north, you have 13 Group in Scotland, doing... stuff, I guess. Whatever you do in Scotland, I don't know. There isn't much up there worth bombing, actually. Half of it already looks like it's been bombed already. And you don't even get air superiority score in this game for bombing Scottish airfields, so the only reason I'll be raiding it is to force the RAF up there to fly missions, wearing out their pilots and planes in the process. It'll literally just be nuisance raids to force them to scramble. Maybe I'll bomb Laserpig's house for funsies, I don't know. And finally, you have 12 Group, responsible for defending the north of England and the Midlands. Their primary base of operations in the Battle of Britain is RAF Coltishall, located in Norfolk,
Yes.
home of the Canadian 242 Squadron, led by Douglas Bader, the Legless Wonder. Unfortunately, though, 12 Group is commanded by his patron and mentor, Mr. Big Wing himself, and quite possibly the worst human being who has ever served in the Royal Air Force.
Yep.
Which is quite the statement given his competition. His name was Trafford Lee Mallory.
Off the bloody mic.
Hey!
you colonial peasant. Give it
what the
here.
hell
This is
is
my
you
man.
doing?
Right. Trafford Lee Mallory. Who he, you might be asking. Well, now, he
Who
was
the
the
fuck is
Who,
this?
as Britain was fighting for its very existence, decided that politics was more important than actually fighting the battle. Firstly, and insanely, he asked for 11 Group to be moved to the Midlands and 12 Group, his group, to be moved to the south, as 12 Group was the superior force, which of course it bloody wasn't because he was in command. Fortunately, Dowding looked at him like he was completely mad and refused the transfer. Then, mortal offence having been taken, not just against that, but also at the fact that the Germans weren't attacking through his group, he decided to make everything he could as hard as possible for Keith Park, who was a commander of 11 Group next door, by withholding, for example, his best flyers and not allowing transfers into out of 12 Group without his rubber stamp. Thus, Keith Park, who, let's not bloody forget, was in the middle of fighting an existential fight against an all-out Nazi attack designed to wipe the RAF literally off the face of the map, and that in turn was designed to allow German troops to land in the United Kingdom and wipe us all off the face of the earth, had to beg Trafford Lee Sodding Mallory for f***ing support, which of course Mallory refused, allowing only his most junior pilots to go and fight in one of the most intense phases of air combat in recorded history. Instead, Mallory, aided and abetted by that muppet Douglas Bader, came up with his so-called big wing tactic of grouping several fighter squadrons together in one place and attacking the enemy in a concentrated force, which makes sense if you can do it quickly and you can get the vector right, which often they didn't, meaning that the Germans would bomb their target and go home for schnapps and schnitzel before Mallory's big wang even knew what was happening. And all of this would be bad enough, but after the sodding battle, he got Dowding fired, took his job and proceeded to use the Battle of Britain veteran pilots as ground attack pilots over France, where they were killed en masse. 500 of them died in the process before he was ordered to stop. He was also the bell end responsible for the decision to keep the entire production run of Spitfires and any new fighters at all at home, when they could have made a huge difference in places like Malta and North Africa and of course Burma. And he was the monkey who stopped the long-range fighter program, which meant that when the Americans came over, they had no support. And he was the monkey that refused to advance the Meteor program in 1942. Fortunately, it turned out, however, that his stupidity was in fact terminal, and in November of 1944, on his way to being posted to the Burma front, where doubtless he would have made everything much worse by trying to, I don't know, use DC-10s as bombers or something, he insisted that his pilot take off into dreadful alpine weather, where he was killed in the subsequent crash. And I've made some posters on the subject, so if you want to buy a poster, you can go and get one from my shop.
God damn!
Thank you. You may have your microphone back.
Finally, thank you. You know, this is my channel. You are shilling things on my... You know what, never mind. And in fairness, he also sells mugs, and they're actually quite good. Alright, back to the matter at hand. So how does all of this that I've just mentioned play into our plans? Well, it all comes down to the Parkes Dowding system and how it operates. It is, as mentioned before, the first integrated air defense system in human history, which means I'm going to have to explain how an IADS works. However, it is limited by the fact that surface-to-air missiles, digital communications, and automated anti-aircraft guns don't exist yet. Thus, it relies on its fighter squadrons to act as its means to repel and destroy violators of Britain's airspace. Therefore, the primary focus of RAF Fighter Command is their GCIN, Ground Controlled Intercept Network. Radar stations detect incoming aircraft using IFF, or Identification Friend or Foe procedures, to determine their affiliation. Once identified as hostile, they are classed as bandits, which, if flying in a large group, are then classified as a raid. However, early radar was not exactly great in dealing with ground clutter or atmospheric variances in terrain, so once they near the shoreline, the ground-based Observer Corps, utilizing the Mark I eyeball, takes over raid reporting.
The good
This
old
is
Mark
called
I eyeball.
the detection phase. They relay information to the sector controller located in a command center like the one you see in all the movies, with people moving counters around as generals look nervously from above. These control centers handle what is called the battle management phase, where each incoming raid is determined by threat level based on what type of aircraft they are, where they are headed, and the assets required to deal with it. Once these have been calculated, the sector controller commits a weapon system to destroy the threat, which in our time would be a surface-to-air missile or something of the like, but in this case is a squadron of RAF fighter aircraft. The controllers in the command center then guide those fighters into the best possible interception point available, at which point they transfer into the final phase, weapons control, which is handled by the squadron commander in the air, who decides on the tactics to employ and ultimately shoots down the enemy with his 8 Browning machine guns. This is the system we have to destroy. Our primary targets are the sector airfields, which house the sector controller headquarters buildings and command bunkers, as well as the best facilities for operating fighter aircraft, all of their best refueling and repair facilities, as well as most of Britain's sealed runways, all of which being located at these bases. Furthermore, destroying these bases halves the effectiveness of the smaller satellite fields assigned to each sector, meaning aircraft stationed there will take longer to get orders, have less fuel and ammunition to use, while the pilots are sitting in huts, tents, or in their cockpits on standby, rather than in their comfy officers' mess back at home base, lowering their morale, worsening their fatigue, and of course just generally making life hard. In the context of the game, destroying sector airfields gives us air superiority score, which is what we need to win. So, let's briefly go over that. We are going to attempt to achieve a full air superiority victory. As you can see by the scoring system down there in the bottom left corner, I need to score 17 points overall to win. But there are 2 caveats. First, if I score 12 points in air superiority, I will win outright, as I have achieved air supremacy. Or second, I achieve 8 points of air superiority within 3 weeks. This breaks British morale and forces them to terms, as the RAF has basically been blitzkrieged into the ground. This is also known as sudden death mode, where you crush the RAF so completely resistance collapses. As you can imagine, this victory is very hard to achieve, but it is what we are going to attempt. And the best way to achieve that goal is by hitting our other primary target, the radar network. Without the ability to detect our raids, and without a command and control system to guide their intercepts, the RAF will have to rely on listening into our radio chatter to guess when we are launching our raids, and then fly endless standing patrols over the coastline to spot us. And without radar to lock us in, nor the controllers to track our movements because we've blown up their airfields, if that patrol isn't in the right place at the right time, our raids can sail right past them without a problem, allowing us to hit even more sector airfields. And, after flying all those patrols and running around trying to intercept bombers they can't find, the RAF pilots get tired. They make mistakes, while the ground crews have to do triple the maintenance cycles, leading to the other way to get air superiority score. The old-fashioned way. In Step 2, destroy all enemy aircraft, in the air, on the ground, or in the maintenance depot of hell. If we can reduce the RAF's ready fighters below a certain threshold, we are able to mount raids without opposition, thereby attaining air supremacy, aka, we win. Now, of course, ground destruction isn't as effective in killing or wounding pilots, obviously, but if we can destroy in excess of 100 RAF fighters a week on the ground, it will start having an effect. Industry will start to bottleneck. Through careful management of our resources and a cohesive, modern, one might even say, NATO-inspired air campaign, the odds are in our favor. Hence the name, Operation Channel Storm. Neutralize the air defense network, decapitate command and control, crush the survivors. After that, it's infrastructure and interdiction strikes for a week until we paddle across the sea in our U-boat panzers, where hopefully we sink the Royal Navy.
Yeah, this is why I'm saying these are impractical, but the DD tank was at least semi-practical. This shit just isn't.
You can see absolutely no flaws in this plan. But Operation Sea Lion itself is not modelled in this game, so that's my group commander's and Field Marshal von Brauschitz's problem. What is my problem, however,
who do you have as your
is
Field
Step
Marshal?
3,
Is Big a Field
complete
Marshal?
and utter
Knowing
annihilation
Big, he would
of
be.
Great Yarmouth. And anyone who has ever seen it doesn't need to ask why. But for your reference, here is a picture. Besides, this is the Reich.
We will ask the questions.
So, without further ado, We shall tell the tale of the Battle of Britain with both realities side by side.
Okay.
And on August the 12th, 1940, my campaign began.
Day one.
Day 1. As I said in the planning discussion, knowing is the first half of the battle. The violence will come tomorrow. I utilised the good weather throughout the day to launch every single high-altitude or high-speed recon aircraft at my disposal to cover as many RAF airfields as possible. Each Fighter Command sector airfield will be photographed with as many satellite fields as secondary recon targets, spreading these flights out to limit the number of RAF fighters launched to intercept them, keeping radio activity low as a result. We managed to get high-quality photographs of 90% of Fighter Command's airfields, revealing to me, and more importantly my fighter pilots, exactly where the enemy is. However, that was only Phase 1. Phase 2 is even more devious. You see, at this point in the month, at this time of year, that being summer, visibility conditions at night are rather good. In my raid planning interface, you can see what time the sun sets and what time the moon rises and how full it will be. This in turn guides how effective night raids will be, which can further be enhanced by both bombing at lower altitudes and having the raids led by the most experienced crews who have superior instrument flying abilities. But there is one clever little feature that really helps my strategy. When navigating at night, there is one clearly visible landmark that can help in getting a position fix, and that is a coastline.
Yes.
And if you are bombing at night with a full moon, at low altitude you should be able to see details on the horizon. Details like a radar mast. Oh yes, that's right gang. We are launching an all-out assault on the radar network on the very first night, while our bomber squadrons are at full strength. The reason for this is twofold. 1, more bombers at peak efficiency will guarantee good results, obviously. And 2, night raids can't be intercepted by day fighters, which minimises our casualties. Because the only night fighters the British have are Blenheims. And Blenheims only have 4 303 machine guns and a first-generation radar that barely works. These things are the definition of stinky. Right, let's
What, no
get this
bow
show on the
fighters?
road. Start the clock. Now, the observant among you will notice 2 things. First, the RAF are scrambling day fighters to intercept night raids. This is a clever little trick of mine. Night raids will only launch with sufficient darkness, meaning that the raids will be delayed until the sun sets. But crucially, the planning and organisation phase for the raids will still go ahead, which will drive up huge amounts of radio traffic. That's right, I'm cheesing the mechanics. But I'm doing it to follow a real-life strategy of simulating raids with fake communications.
Jeez.
This drives up maintenance and fatigue factors because RAF fighters will scramble, which is what we want. The other thing, though, is that it adequately demonstrates that being an old war game, the gameplay itself is not exactly a riveting watch. Thankfully, though, due to our superior area and technology and our location in northern France, we have a solution. It's called a montage.
Montage!
And there we go. RAF fighters located, radar network degraded, targeting folders updated, and only 1 bomber lost due to a landing accident. That, gentlemen, is what we call in the business a big, fat dub. And we did way better than our historical counterparts. On this day, the Luftwaffe attempted to destroy the radar network, striking several of the chain-home radar stations, with the hardest hit being Ventnor on the Isle of Wight, and there were also a few preemptive raids on several coastal RAF airfields and night raids on civilian targets. Unfortunately for them, though fortunately for humanity, the RAF was on full alert and at full strength. 33 Luftwaffe aircraft were shot down and 19 more damaged for very little result. All the radar stations were operational within 2 hours or so, and the holes in all the airfields were filled in. A few hangars blew up, but no serious damage. Without solid intelligence and underestimating both the response time and capability of Fighter Command, they received a rude awakening. Yet still, Beppo Schmidt would report all the radar stations destroyed and the airfields obliterated. But the real fight had yet to begin, as tomorrow is...
Eagle Day, underdog. I know I butchered
All
that.
right. Now, historically, this was the day of the Luftwaffe's first grand assault. They planned to hit every major airfield in 11 Group sector, a maximum effort strike to crush the RAF. As you can imagine, doing this without laying any of the proper groundwork is a bold strategy, and we'll see how it works out for them. But they were very, very confident in their superiority, both in numbers and capability. Only things immediately unraveled as the weather conditions at dawn were absolutely awful, bad enough to cancel operations entirely, at least for the morning, which Goering ordered them to do. Except, you know how I mentioned everything in Nazi Germany kind of operates in its own little bubble, and no one shares information with one another?
Yeah.
Well, the fighter escorts got the cancellation order, but the bombers didn't.
Oof.
No one had thought to do some simple things like, I don't know, ensure that the radios fitted to all of their aircraft were functioning correctly in the poor weather conditions, and both the bomber and fighter squadrons didn't share their frequency tables or communications cards with each other, meaning that no one could talk to anyone else.
You
It
fools!
was only due to the bad weather and an error in RAF radar control that the first
Combat is like a relationship. Communication is key! Fucking A. Ugh. The best tacticians will always be men with good men and women with good marriages. That is all that will be fun. That is all. That's what you just. This is what you need. This is what planners need to start doing. Like, okay, he's gonna command the army. Yes. Okay. How's his marriage? Is he lucky and is his marriage good? Those are the qualifications to become a supreme commander. Are they lucky and is their marriage in one piece?
first wave of aircraft hit their target at all, and that target was Eastchurch Airfield. Except Eastchurch wasn't a fighter command base at all, but a coastal command base. So while some Blenheims got blown up and some ground crew were unfortunately killed, on the whole the raids were completely ineffective and achieved absolutely nothing. In return, 5 Dorniers were shot down, with another 10 or so damaged bad enough to be written off. When the morning weather cleared slightly, the all-out assault was reordered. Yet despite the best efforts of the fighter bombers and the raids yesterday, the radar stations were still fully active and directing interceptors. When Luftflotte 3 headed to the aircraft factories in Portsmouth and Bristol, along with 10 groups based at Middle Wallop, they ran into almost 100 fighters at superior altitude. The Stukas attacking the airfields were savaged, while the bombers were constantly attacked. The 109s tried to fend them off, but with the altitude advantage, the RAF fighters just blew right past them. The viciousness of the Spitfires and Hurricanes' attack forced them to abandon their primary missions and just hit whatever looked important. The damage to the British war effort was absolutely devastating as a result. The furniture factory in Southampton was completely obliterated. Meanwhile, in the 11 Group sector, their raids went no better. Clouds obscured half the airfields, preventing accurate bombing, while the airfields they did hit were again coastal command fields. Detling was devastated by Stukas and their escorts, but no damage was done to any fighter command assets. By the end of the day, the Luftwaffe had lost 47 aircraft shot down, at the loss of only 13 RAF fighters, and of them, only 3 of the pilots were lost. As the famous line from the film puts it, our young men have to shoot down their young men at a rate of 4 to 1 if they are to keep pace at all. And if these stats were anything to go by, it very much appeared that they could. It was a rough start for the Luftwaffe, but my version of Eagle Day went way, way better.
Oh?
The plan today was less ambitious for obvious reasons. My intel is good, and I understand the threat level, but I also know where the RAF is.
Yeah.
It is time to continue with Phase 1. Blinding the IADs is our primary goal, so the raids today are set for 2 mass wave attacks, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. The fighter pilots will have to fly twice, but it's their first day and they can deal with it. The raids are targeted exclusively at the radar stations. This has the added bonus of being coastal targets, minimizing the exposure of our vulnerable bombers to fighter command's interceptions, while our nighttime raids are all targeted at the sector airfields. Their effectiveness won't be fantastic, but it does do damage. It makes life hard, the crews don't get any sleep, and if we're lucky we'll hit the odd fighter parked on the ground. All of this, though, isn't the main goal. Oh no. The main goal comes half an hour after each wave, when a squadron of 109s strafes their airfields. Hey, war isn't fair, I want to win. Fighter command will have either just landed and are next to fuel bowsers or ammo trucks in the open, or, even better, they are on approach to land and practically helpless. And how did this plan go? Well, my reaction should give it away. They're all landing and rearming and refueling.
Oof.
67 RAF fighters destroyed at the loss of 19 of our own.
Ooh,
22 RAF pilots seriously wounded, 8 killed in action. Opening our account in a satisfactory fashion. Even
Shit.
with Lord Beaverbrook's production and repair figures, they can't sustain losses like that daily. However, I won't reckon on that being a regular occurrence. Even so, our campaign continues.
Day 3. Yeah, already we're not looking too
Welcome
good.
to Day 3, and by now the RAF's command and control network
Well, it's
is
already
shot
Day
to
3 and
hell.
you already have 4
As you
air
can see, nothing
superiority.
but red
This is
radar
looking
stations
good.
all the way along. However, it's not over yet. 1 or 2
Take
still
it easy,
remain,
Stephen.
and
Have a
just
good
one
one.
is enough to cause
Hey,
us
you can watch
problems.
the rest of it tomorrow.
So today, we fix that problem. The remaining radar stations in Norfolk and on the south coast are singled out for demolition. We're also going to smash the coastal airfields. Safe, easy, denies them to the enemy, and most importantly, gets their fighters up so I can say hello to them on landing. What's really useful, though, is that after the aircraft we took out yesterday, and with their radar network gone, that frees up the rest of our recon aircraft to take lots of pretty pictures of their airfields. You can run, Dowding, but you can't hide. As for our historical counterparts, according to Beppo the Brainiac, the RAF was down to 300 fighters in total. The radar network was gone, and the Endsieg was at hand. All of these assessments, of course, were absolutely incredibly wrong, but that's nothing new. When the Luftwaffe came up on the 14th of August, they were still reeling from the losses they'd suffered, yet they once again flew straight at the RAF's airfields and aircraft factories, and again they were intercepted and crushed. In particular, one raid on Cardiff was torn to shreds as their escorts couldn't cover them all the way across and back. By the end of the day, they'd lost 19 aircraft, 9 more written off, and practically no damage was done to fighter command. Now let's see how we do.
Back with the montage! Jesus!
Huh. Would you look at that? Still in the positive. That makes 95 RAF fighters destroyed in 3 days. Even if their pilot losses don't correlate, their readiness will steadily decrease at this rate. But there is one other factor. My night raids did the same thing as yesterday, while our fighter sweeps are staggered, meaning A, we inflicted damage on their sector airfields at night, reducing their effectiveness, but more importantly B, our pilots and aircraft are only flying twice a day at max. I haven't launched maximum effort raids yet because I want to preserve my readiness rates.
That's
The
fair.
RAF, meanwhile, are flying 4, if not 5 times a day. Pilots burn themselves out while the aircraft are taking a beating. Tie that in with our constant hunt for their fighters on the ground, and we'll steadily grind them into the dirt. But now it's time to turn up the heat.
Day 4. Okay. Only 4 more days left to get to 8.
Well, here we are on day 4. The IADS is out of commission, so now it's time to initiate Phase 2 and decapitate the chain of command, while inflicting more casualties. Ironically enough, today my plan is roughly the same as the historical mission plans, though I've done a lot more groundwork to ensure its success and to make sure most of my guys don't die. Oh, also, we're bombing Laserpig's house today. Why? Well, the Scottish fighters count towards their readiness rates, so we need them to wear themselves out as well by scrambling to shoot at us. As for everything else, today we hit RAF sector airfields in force.
Alright, well,
We have
Pig's
raids
not going to
on
be
all the major
happy.
bases
Oh
across
boy.
2 large waves. Each wave has fighters stacked up on high escort at various layers, with orders to chase down the RAF should they try and engage us. We also have fighters to catch them on landing. Today we are going all in. Our night raids are hitting sector fields too for maximum damage. It's going to cost us, I have no doubt, but we stole the march on them. With the damage we are inflicting, we can afford it. For the Luftwaffe in our timeline, though, today would be known as Black Thursday. They attempted the same thing I'm trying to do, an assault on the sector airfields and an offensive against the air bases in the north. That would cost them very dearly. Believing that the RAF had redeployed completely to the south due to a shortage of aircraft, instead every single raid was intercepted in force, with only Kenley and Middle Wallop suffering any significant damage. Every other target, as well as the radar network, were fully operational again by the end of the day. The bombers up north, meanwhile, were savagely cut down. This battle was so decisive, it's immortalized in the film Battle of Britain as Fighter Command's first big win.
Yep. Help yourself, everybody. There's no fighter escort. Back when movies didn't need CGI, they had real shit.
By sunset, 78 German aircraft had been lost, with most of their crews. with another squadron completely written off due to damage. I'm confident our missions today will fare better. As for how much our efforts will pay off, well, we'll have to see. Well, I'm confident we hit Edinburgh. Whether we got Pig's House or not, I can't be sure. The airfield's got an absolute pasting, though.
Damn, though.
As for losses, we are
jumped
dead
up from
even.
4 to 6.
33 for
2
33.
more points and you win.
Not a great ratio for our pilot losses, but have a look at that air superiority score.
Oof.
Boyos, we are making progress.
I'm pretty sure the pig is screaming. Probably what he said.
Day 5, and British weather has arrived.
Oh no.
A scourge upon both us and our historical counterparts alike. Historically, on
Fucking
August
British
16th,
weather.
the Luftwaffe attacked airfields again. However, thanks to the excellent intelligence they possessed, courtesy of Beppo, they hit the training airfield at Bryce Norton, the Coastal Command base at Gosport, and a satellite field at Lyon-Solent. The only fighter command airfield they actually
You
hit
absolute
was Hangmere,
pillock!
which they inflicted minimal damage on. In these efforts, they lost 49 aircraft with another 19 written off. In return, the RAF lost barely any. In fact, up to that point, total RAF losses in fighters was less than 60, which, no matter how you cut it, was not matching up to their casualty projections. In fact, not only was Beppo Schmidt's estimates blowing their effectiveness out of proportion, the bomber gunners and fighter pilots respectively were claiming everything they shot at. Some estimates put Luftwaffe claims during the Battle of Britain at 300% overclaiming ratio, which again is entering into Soviet-Russian territory.
Yeah, you're making the
Then again,
Soviets
Stalin
look
in
modest.
1941 claimed that German casualties during the first phase of Operation Barbarossa was several million. So maybe not that bad. As for
Okay, I
my
stand
plan
corrected.
today, well, there's no way of getting around it. The weather is crap, so I'm not going to bomb. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to fly. Instead, I'm going to switch things up. We're going to rest our entire force, while the fighter pilots are only going to fly once. We're going to strafe every airfield we know has RAF fighters on them in multiple ways throughout the day. The RAF, without their radar, will launch thinking there's bombers on the way, and those that don't get destroyed on the ground will be forced to come down for maintenance. In essence, our readiness rates will be back to full with a rest day, while the RAF are as busy as ever. And away we go. Look at that. 45 aircraft destroyed with only 5 of my own lost.
That's...
Granted, I didn't kill any pilots, but they'll have to replace those
that's
aircraft.
nasty.
That makes it, what, 173 RAF fighters destroyed in 5 days? That's a good start, but we aren't done yet.
Ouch. Day 6.
Day 6 is going to be a rather interesting day in our campaign because guess what? The Luftwaffe historically didn't actually do anything today. After suffering so many losses in the first week, they needed to take a day off to rest their crews and get serviceability up. Our operations, on the other hand, will continue, and today we are being rather ballsy. After taking the previous day off, our bomber pilots are going to earn their money today. The day starts with strikes on the radar stations, as it always does. However, today we are experimenting. Throughout the day, we will be running constant fighter sweeps over their airfields to draw them up and wear them out, while blowing up or damaging as many fighters on the ground as possible. Then, in the evening, the bombers will sweep over every airfield in 12, 11 and 10 group at once, with Bf-110s and escort alongside the morning fighters on their second sortie. The real risk here is the bombers hitting 12 group. They will be coming in low below the radar and hitting the bases at low altitude. We expect very high casualties due to flak. However, we don't really have a choice. Those bases need to go down, and these brave young men will give their lives for the fatherland. It's a sacrifice I am willing to make. I think there is a line from Helsing abridged about this somewhere.
True. Also, I believe our forces are being quite literally slaughtered.
Who gives a shit? They're Nazis.
In any case, the idea is pretty
His
straightforward.
name is
After
Helmut.
smacking down the RAF in the
No,
morning,
Hamburg.
we should be relatively safe.
Why
But
the
we shall
fuck
see
are you
now,
a
won't we?
cyborg?
That's called a montage. We got a montage. If anything, if you want to.
Ooh,
That's our
hurt.
first really rough day.
Ouch!
Relatively even, given the correlation of forces and the amount of damage we inflicted. Air superiority is up to 7, so we're almost there.
Yeah.
But god damn, days like that we can do without. But that's nothing, because tomorrow is a doozy.
The hardest. Ooh.
A week into the battle, and the Germans were under the impression that despite their heavy losses, they had inflicted serious damage on the RAF. Beppo the Braindead had given them an intel briefing that morning, saying that the Englanders only had their final reserves left, and that one decisive blow would finish them off. In fact, the Royal Air Force had, over the course of the previous week, well, there's no other way of putting it, guys, it had gotten bigger. Fighter Command now had 800 fighters available across all of its groups, though the pilot situation was a bit dire due to fatigue, casualties, and a lack of replacements. Training programs were accelerating to match the intensity of the fighting, but it was a long way before the famous Empire Air Training Scheme got underway in earnest. The Polish and Czech squadrons, who would end up being the top-scoring RAF units during the Battle of Britain, had yet to enter combat
Even
due to
more
being
proof,
perceived
Poland,
as unreliable because of
Poles
the language
are fucking
barrier.
scary.
But soon they would be required to step up in order to rest an exhausted fighter command. On the 18th of August, the Luftwaffe had planned to hit the key sector airfields: Hornchurch, North Weald, Kenley, and Biggin Hill. The difference was today they were going to hit them in force. Meanwhile, Luftflotte 3 planned to strike the Isle of Wight's radar stations in coordination with their coastal airfields at Ford and Thorney Island. It was to be a maximum effort
We'll probably
assault,
find out at the end of
with
this
both
meeting. I don't
low-altitude
remember.
and high-altitude raiders performing synchronized attacks as Stukas flattened the western coastal targets. And all of it was to be preceded by literally every fighter available sweeping ahead of the formations, as the Bf-110s escorted behind. This wasn't the normal sporadic one raid here, one strafing run there. This was several waves of 100-plus aircraft raids right into the heart of Fighter Command against their main bases. A stand-up fight to the finish.
Oh boy.
However, the day ended up being a disaster for both sides, as both the main attacks from the Luftwaffe and the interceptions from the RAF went horribly wrong. The bomber formations heading to the airfields got disorganized during the form-up process, meaning the low-level attacks would arrive before the high-altitude dive-bombing missions from the Ju-88s. Therefore, the AA guns and the base defenses would be completely unengaged when the low-level strikes rolled in for their bomb run. Every defensive gun would be able to fire at point-blank range on targets they really couldn't miss. The 9th Staffel of KG-76 in their Dornier 17s rolled in on Kenley at low level, only to find that the base was fully operational and their comrades
What the
up
fuck
high
is
were
that,
nowhere in
Todd?
sight.
Why are there
Nevertheless,
flashes
they
coming
pressed
from the
their
base?
attack on Dornier.
Oh
The
shit!
results of their attack were devastating. Kenley's base buildings and hangars were obliterated, while the field itself was cratered all over. However, this came at the cost of over 50% casualties, with a further 25% of the aircraft being written off for damage. When the Ju-88s showed up 10 minutes later, they shifted to their secondary target at RAF West Malling, as the sheer devastation raised a pall of smoke so thick they couldn't even see their targets. As they approached, though, Fighter Command began intercepting the raids heading into Biggin Hill and West Malling, only to find that the Bf-109s operating independently had gained the height and speed advantage while trialing new escort tactics. Every time the British fighters tried to intercept, they were beaten back with heavy losses. Biggin Hill and West Malling both suffered serious damage, though not as critical as Kenley. The only major Win 11 group would have is their reserve squadrons ran across some Bf-110s coming to escort the bombers back home and murdered an entire squadron of ZG-26. Fortunately, though, 10 Group would have far better luck. For although 2 of the Stuka raids got through causing serious damage to Ford Airfield and Poling Radar Station, along with light damage to Gosport Fleet Air Arm Station, the price they paid for it was extortionate, with the raid on Thorney Island being stopped cold completely, with only 2 bomb hits recorded on the field.
Jeez.
The 109s escorting them ran into every Spitfire in the western UK, with the Hurricanes descending like locusts on the Stukas. 6 109s were lost in the subsequent dogfight, while 16 Stukas were shot down, with double that significantly damaged.
Youch.
Essentially, the entirety of Stuka-Geschwader 77 was rendered combat ineffective, demonstrating that as long as the RAF could contest the airspace, it would be futile for the Ju-87 to operate. Thus, after today, they would be completely withdrawn from the Battle of Britain. By the end of the day, RAF Fighter Command had lost 31 fighters shot down, with 39 more seriously damaged. On the ground, a further 30 aircraft of all types were destroyed, including bombers and training aircraft. 10 pilots were killed, and 10 more seriously wounded. This would be one of the worst days for Fighter Command during the battle in terms of both losses and damage inflicted. But the Luftwaffe came off far worse.
Yeah,
71
England got a
aircraft
bloody
had been shot
nose.
down. 30 more written
But
off, most of them with their
Germany
crews
definitely
captured or
broke
killed.
something.
No less than 150 Luftwaffe airmen were lost that day, which, given the correlation of forces, was not a loss rate any air force could afford, let alone Germany's. August 18th would forever be known in British histories as the hardest day of the Battle of Britain, and one of the bloodiest days of aerial combat in history. As for our own campaign, however, I have a different plan. My objective for today is to hit the radar network again, expanding my strikes to cover Norfolk and the Midlands to pave the way for strikes on the airfields up north, which won't result in all of my bombers dying. I'm also going to continue suppressing the ones I've already hit in 11 Group, as well as hitting the coastal airfields in the afternoon. The fighters are once again flying separate from the bombers in sweeps to catch the RAF on landing or during rearming. We will keep our regular flight hours to keep our pilots well rested, though the night raids will be larger than usual against, yes, you guessed it, 12 Group's airfields. We have to hit the Midlands airfields at night, given that we can't hit them properly yet. Anyway, let's go. Now that is more likely.
Ooh!
Granted, we lost a point of air superiority, however that would be the RAF repairing their air bases, and that is something we can fix. What matters is wiping out Fighter Command while keeping my own force intact.
And you do have
Sadly,
2 more
the
weeks.
weather is crap for the next 2 days, but we can use that opportunity to talk about the Luftwaffe's change in tactics mid-August, in a chapter wonderfully titled...
Stop it!
The fat one fucks it up.
After Black Thursday and the hardest day, as well as the lack of concrete success after the first dedicated week and a half of operations, Hermann Goering called a conference for the senior leaders of the Luftwaffe regarding their lack of progress and the heavy losses sustained. Once everyone arrived, he immediately went on a tirade, much the same as his Führer would do, saying that there was a lack of will and zeal among the aviators, especially the fighter pilots. The bombers were taking casualties that were completely unacceptable, and despite the goal being shooting down the RAF, in Goering's mind the airfields and the aviation industry were the primary target, with shooting down the RAF being but one component of the overall campaign to shut down Fighter Command. Now, as we've established, their overall plan was just to destroy Fighter Command. They didn't actually have a plan or even a cohesive method of how they were going to do this, and they didn't even follow it up with a why. It was just shoot down planes and somehow the Navy will move the army across the channel in boats they didn't have with submersible tanks.
Jesus.
Though they did develop a floating transport barge with a Flak 88 on it, so there is that. Therefore, Goering made several proclamations on operational matters that were to change how the Luftwaffe would continue the battle. First, the leadership structure for the fighter squadrons would be amended. They would henceforth have an official Geschwader Kommandeur, a combat leader for an entire wing, which would be held by a newly promoted group of senior officers made up of younger men cut from the same mould as Werner Mulders and Adolf Galland. The idea being that these new dynamic up-and-coming officers would inject some offensive spirit into the fighter squadrons, while being able to disseminate their experience and devise new tactics. This was actually a fantastic idea, and would work wonders in keeping the Luftwaffe going through the latter years of the war. However, Goering immediately kneecapped this initiative by categorically stating that protecting the bombers in hitting their targets to undermine the British aircraft industry and their airfields was the primary concern. Thus, the fighters were no longer to range off on their own and hunt down Fighter Command. Their role was the opposite, to protect the bombers. Now, for those of you familiar with history, and those of you watching my campaign, you will note that the United States Army Air Force, 8th Air Force, went through this exact same dilemma, only to realize that if you have enough heavy bombers, you actually can prosecute a strategic air war. And if they are heavily armed, like, say, I don't know, an aircraft named the Flying Fortress, you can leave one squadron of fighters with them to fend off attacks, while everyone else goes and hunts the enemy fighters over their launch points. Adolf Galland had already started developing his own version of this strategy by sending his fighters 20 minutes ahead of the bombers to meet the RAF as they were coming up, and as we saw on the hardest day, it worked. So now, after all the lessons learned and after all the effort made by their fighter pilots, Goering ordered it all to be abandoned in favour of close escort. The fighters would stick right above the bombers, forced to fly in formation with them in tight groups at slower speed, allowing the RAF to gain superior speed and altitude over the 109s, meaning they weren't actually saving bombers at all, they were simply trading fighter losses for bomber losses, which may seem sensible on an economic scale, but only if you have a large strategic bombing force and schools with expert instructors to replace your fighter pilots at scale, and the Luftwaffe had neither. The only way they were going to win is if they kept killing the RAF while they were doing the bombing, which now they can't do.
Yeah.
And then, just to finish off, came the clincher. In order to focus efforts on the factories and airfields, all raids against radar stations would be stopped.
You
Because as far
fools!
as the Germans knew, all they did was tell the British they were coming and roughly where they were coming from. They had no idea about the Park Doubting system. They didn't even have a concept of what an IADS is. So in fact, leaving the radar up was a good thing. It meant the RAF would always take off to fight them. It's just they didn't realize it also allowed the RAF to get superior height and altitude while getting precision guided into the best attack position. Naturally, the fighter pilots protested, but to no avail. They were to escort the bombers to target. The only silver lining was the younger fighter leaders had developed tactics for this mission and held the initiative in refining them. Unfortunately for them, though, this would be offset by the reduction in combat effectiveness of the fighters. Oh, and the fact that the Bf-110 would now also be escorted, despite being designed as an escort fighter. Yeah. You know, the Bf-110 would eventually be developed into a magnificent close air support aircraft and later really come into its own to shine as a night fighter.
Yeah.
But it just couldn't compete directly with the Spitfires and Hurricanes in aerial combat.
No.
However, the worst effect of its defeat over Britain was because it was Goering's pet project. And because it was his pet project, he had assigned all of the highest scoring graduates from the fighter pilot schools to Bf-110s at the start of hostilities.
Bruh.
So a third of Germany's best fighter pilots were now POWs or dead at the hands of the Spitfires, having achieved basically nothing.
Bruh.
Over the next 2 days, the Luftwaffe, like us, had to contend with terrible weather, though another major factor was the heavy losses they'd suffered in the campaign so far. On the 19th of August, they hit 2 oil tank farms while performing recon flights to check the results of their previous missions. On the 20th, they launched one large wave of raids against Manston and Hornchurch. However, the raid at Hornchurch was pushed back over the Thames estuary, being forced to withdraw. Scattered night raids were launched on both nights against civilian population centres throughout southeast England, but damage was very limited. These 2 days would only see 20 Luftwaffe aircraft shot down and a further 10 seriously damaged. Both sides used these 2 days to reconstitute their forces in order to throw down hard in the last week of August. As for me, well, I had different ideas. Well, day 8 is going to be like all bad weather days. I rest the bombers because they aren't going to be able to hit anything anyway. The only ground strikes today will be night raids, with the exception of one against a coastal airfield which has some fighters parked on it. And as for everyone else, the fighters are going to steadily fly throughout the day, 1 flight per Gruppen. Lower intensity operations, but intense enough to destroy fighters on the ground while forcing the RAF to fly. Los geht's! Not bad. Didn't make any serious progress on the air superiority front, but if we keep this kind of pressure up for the next week or so, they're going to start running out of replacement aircraft.
Yeah.
Then again, my losses aren't exactly insignificant either. I've got more to lose, but the balance of forces is factored into air superiority, so our efforts won't mean anything if I haven't got any planes to bomb England with after we win.
Yeah. Day 9.
Day 9, and guess what? The weather got worse.
Ah!
Can't really
That's
do
the
much.
other barrier of England, their
Shit.
fucking weather.
Well, nothing for it. Low-level raids on coastal targets, low-level fighter sweeps. I think we'll just take the day off today. Yes, the RAF will reconstitute, but I think we've done enough damage over the past week to afford it. All we have to do is bomb some airfields, which will be risky, as we've discussed the heavy AA based at RAF sector stations, but we don't really have a choice on a day like today. But only the nearly full-strength Gripen will fly. We will launch a full wave in the morning, but there is one useful ploy I'm going to pull here. Low-level assaults on the Midlands and even northern radar stations. Again, paving the way for deep penetration raids so our bombers don't get slaughtered while forcing them to scramble 12 Group and chase our low-flying Ju-88s back across the North Sea. It will force all the fighter command to come up at least once while damaging their IADs and their sector fields. Will it do critical damage? No, not really. But as soon as this weather clears up, the whole Luftwaffe just about will be ready to rock. Alright. Hit it. Yeesh, that raid on Saint Aval in the west was rough. Recon said it didn't have any AA guns, that's why I flew in so low. But on the plus side, that field is obliterated, and looking at the stats, it looks like the RAF is starting to suffer attrition. Their readiness rate has gone up, but then again, so has ours.
They win.
Their IADS is down,
And we
their
win.
airfields have been battered, their pilots have been flying 4 or 5 times a day versus our once or twice. The past 2 days have gotten our readiness rates back up, and it's time to take those Tommy bastards down. The decisive battle is upon us.
10 days. Well, we'll see if they got it. Come on.
Alright, gang, it's day 10, and it's time to strap in and strap on, because we are doing this shit. It's time for a maximum effort, and we are bringing everyone. That's right, the Stukas are coming along on this one. Today, we are starting the day off with a massive, aggressive fighter sweep over southeast England. With the radar network compromised, 11 group mounts standing patrols over Dover when radioactivity gets high. With every fighter getting airborne in the morning, they will have to launch, and when they get up there, they will find fully rested and refitted Bf-109s at 35,000 feet looking down on them. But not only that, the other fighter wings will be flying ahead to RAF airfields to strafe the reserves and the squadrons that haven't launched yet. My plan is simple. Blast Fighter Command to pieces in the morning, bomb them in the afternoon. But that's not just what I'm doing. With the fighter sweeps patrolling over their airfields and over Dover, I am launching a full-scale, low-altitude assault on the radar network with unescorted bombers, with the Stukas hitting the less active western coastline. With the RAF blinded, half its active-duty fighters damaged or destroyed, it should pave the way for a mass airfield assault in the afternoon, and we are hitting everywhere, right up to the limit of my escort fighters' range. We are also hitting Scotland and the northeastern coast from Luftflotte 5, and we are also launching full-scale night raids on Midland airfields, guided by the Knickerbein guidance system, the radio-directed night bombing system, to achieve maximum accuracy. Simply put, the next few days are the decisive battle. It's make or break time. Historically, this day was a bad weather day, so the Luftwaffe only mounted nuisance raids on this date. But given weather is randomized in-game, we have a different schedule. Thus, without further ado, let's hit it. Look at that. Dead even. We inflicted far more pilot casualties today, though, which is what we want, and their IADS is once again suppressed. We need to finish off these airfields big time, and as long as the weather holds, we should be able to do it. I mean, the weather's looking pretty good. Oh, you've got to be far!
God damn it, English weather!
Day 11. Yep. Bad weather. Again.
God!
So much for the decisive battle. Although this could prove to our advantage if we do it right. Historically, today saw a large strike on Manston and constant attacks on convoys that were still moving through the English Channel at this stage, because the Royal Navy and the Admiralty didn't want to stop using London docks because of the facilities available, and they didn't want to overwhelm Liverpool or Manchester as well as the railway network.
That's fair.
There also may have been a bit of ego involved, but that's mere speculation on my part. In any case, nothing much happened during the battle, and not much is going to happen today either. But I do have a plan here to recoup some losses and keep inflicting damage on Fighter Command through more underhanded methods. Note that 2 of the radar stations in southeast England survived the assault we mounted against them. Well, today we are going to hit them again, but we are also going to do something a bit sneaky. Our fighters are going to rest today. Before, we have used our fighters as bait to draw out the RAF and catch them on the ground. Today, we are going to use our bombers instead. Now, yes, we won't destroy any fighters, but we will force them to scramble. And I'm going to do this with high-altitude decoy raids. We're going to launch large-scale spoiling attacks into unguarded areas of the UK. We're also going to launch recon flights and generally go running around causing a ruckus without risking too much. Yes, we will probably lose some aircraft, but in exchange we will force them to scramble and chase us while expending minimal resources. Decoy raids were a strategy used constantly during the combined bomber offensive by the Allies and later on during the war in Vietnam. Sometimes they were even used as ambushes, such as Operation Bolo, where the North Vietnamese were deceived into attacking a full squadron of US Phantoms instead of the F-105 Thunder Chief bombers they were pretending to be. The methodology, though, is the same. Make the enemy move to your tune while distracting them from your real objective, which in my case is to appear to be doing something while actually doing nothing. The fighter pilots better appreciate the fact I'm giving them the day off. The bomber boys are going to have to suck it up and fly through clouds, and some of them will most likely crash or get picked off by the odd Spitfire. But that's what I pay them for. Anyway, without further ado, run that track.
Let's do it!
Yeah, baby!
Ooh.
Back up to air superiority 7.
Okay.
Sure, we lost some aircraft, but they had to keep scrambling, and I didn't. Plus, there is evidence to suggest that their readiness and replacement rates are starting to run low. After 11 days of operations, the RAF is operating at an average of 200 aircraft losses per week. For reference, historically, the aircraft industry in Britain produced 467 fighters in the month of August. So I am currently on track to win the war of attrition.
Okay.
The real issue for me is pilots. Every loss I take is a crew loss, while the same is not true for the RAF. Granted, half their pilots are approaching combat ineffective due to their level of fatigue, but the fact remains they still have theirs. I've kept my aircraft maintained and supplied. I've kept my pilots in relatively decent shape. It's time to turn on the heat again. Tomorrow we have good weather. It's time to hit them hard. And funnily enough, my historical counterpart drew the same conclusion.
The final battle.
In the historiography of the Battle of Britain, today, the 23rd of August, 1940, is a big deal. As today, Goering made the decision to turn over the progress of the operation entirely to Albert Kesselring, issuing orders that after his intervention and conference earlier in the month, a full focus on fighter command bases, aircraft factories, and main supply ports would take sole focus, and despite their losses, operational tempo was ordered to increase. Now, the Luftwaffe was already run ragged as it was, given the number of losses they'd taken. The term Channel Fever, originally coined as one of enthusiasm to get at the Tommies, was replaced with Channel Sickness. Everyone was tired, worn out, fatigued. They started developing engine trouble or fuel flow problems, and oh god, we'll have to turn back. They just didn't want to cross over the channel and fight the British. However, RAF pilots would get rotated to Scotland as instructors or to guard against the scattered northern raids. Luftwaffe pilots, by contrast, were, due to the manpower limitations and the hyper-aggressive doctrine of Nazi Germany being one of win quick and win hard, their tours of duty were absolutely brutal and seemingly unending. Luftwaffe fighter pilots amassed huge kill numbers by the end of the war, the few lucky to survive, that is, which gives the impression that they were total Ubermensch and so much better than the Allies.
No,
where
they
in
just
reality,
weren't doing-
even during the heights of the France crisis and the Battle of Britain, Allied pilots had similar training and experience to the Luftwaffe pilots, with the exception of the Condor Legion veterans. And by the time the Imperial Air Training Scheme and later the arrival of guess who,
Fuck yeah!
What you gonna do when we come for you?
Damn right,
Allied
baby!
pilots often had more hours in training than their German counterparts had in the military in the first place. Only very few Experten, as they were known, scored very highly, with many of them only managing to achieve their ludicrous success at the hands of relatively untrained, poorly equipped Soviet aviators with painted-on gun sights and awful leadership. But more relevant to our current discussion is the other major factor. They didn't get long service leave, or training rotations, or tour limits. German pilots kept flying. They kept flying until seriously wounded, captured, or killed. Only in death did their duty end for the God Emperor of the Aryan race.
Oh, fuck off.
But what's worse is that it also goes for their aircraft. The Bf-109Es and the early F models by late in the war, although being obsolete, weren't retired, scrapped, or used as training aircraft. Rather, they were palmed off to the Axis allies instead of allowing them to produce aircraft under license. Yes, Axis allies were prevented from manufacturing German weapons under license due to copyright and proprietary information concerns from the Nazi oligarchs, who, despite it being good for the war effort, refused to take a hit to their profit margins. So with a few exceptions, such as the DB605 license to Italy, almost all the equipment distributed to the Axis satellites were used aircraft, and believe me, they were definitely used. If the FAA saw the wing spars of some of those 109s, not even the SS Honor Guard would be able to keep them safe.
Yeah.
The FAA can be scarier than the IRS, believe me.
Oh, let me tell you all this. So everyone knows I for a time I was training, I was actually going to pilot school. I wanted to be a pilot. My instructor actually had a saying when it came to the FAA. Whenever there was a crash or even just a little bump, it doesn't matter how big it was. It could be the biggest fiery fireball crash with hundreds dead, or it could just be a little extra bump or the loss of a single bolt. The FAA officials would crash through the main gates of any airport, run up to the person, run up to the site of the accident, and they'd have with them a book and a special little pen. And what they'd use that pen for, and what that book was the FAA rule book with lots of blank pages, and the pen was specially made to be inserted into pilots' arms or bodies and draw out their blood to use as ink for writing in a brand new rule or regulation. I shit you not. No, of course that's not true, of course. Of course, he's exaggerating on that part. But the whole story of it is, yes, the FAA is literally such sticklers for the rules, and they are very accurate with this. They take their jobs extremely seriously. And I encourage everyone, go check out the FAA rule book. You will see some weird shit in that book. I have read the weirdest of shit, but you want to know the scariest thing? If it's in the FAA handbook, it's happened. There is literally a rule in there that says one shall not fly an aircraft after ingesting an entire bottle of vodka and shoving a certain small animal, somewhere. I shit you not, that fucking happened. How do I know it happened? It's in the FAA rule book. The FAA is a scary organization, and they are rarely ever wrong, and they're jeez. The fucking FAA. God almighty. Continuing on.
By 3 weeks of operations, most of the Luftwaffe squadrons were down to 50% readiness and airframes. There were
that's
pilots
just the weirdest
without
one
planes,
I saw, but
which,
that's definitely
given
not
that
the
pilot
weirdest
losses
one
were
in
also
there.
awful, was a serious situation as it is. And now they were being told to intensify operations. And amazingly enough, intensify operations they did. From August 24th until the beginning of September, the Luftwaffe would mount very heavy raids consistently against fighter command sector stations. Whenever weather permitted, the Luftwaffe was coming. And for a brief moment, the RAF seemed to be running out of steam. New pilots were drawn from other branches of service. Pilots from the Fleet Air Arm, Coastal Command, and the crews from the now defunct Ferry Battle Light Bomber were pressed into service alongside squadrons from exiled nations who didn't speak English. In modern retellings, the history books, documentaries, and the famous film, this period is always depicted as the tensest moment of the battle, and it most certainly was. But it's always depicted as coming down to a razor-thin margin, with the odds so monumental that it seems a miracle that the mighty Nazi juggernaut was held at bay. In reality, analysis done at the time, as well as modern studies, the best being The Most Dangerous Enemy by Stephen Bungray, followed closely by Professor Richard Overy's Battle of Britain, Myth and Reality, demonstrate categorically that while Fighter Command was pressed very, very hard, the damage done to their operational capability during this period, while substantial, was nowhere near fatal, and that Fighter Command was actually larger than when the battle had started.
So
With new pilots coming through the pipeline, the more experienced guys rotating back from Scotland after taking the third week off, and plenty of aircraft coming from Lord Beaverbrook's production and repair initiatives, the RAF was really never in any real danger, and they were able to intercept Luftwaffe raids consistently even as August ended, with both the 30th and 31st involving 3 full waves of raids against Biggin Hill, Kenley, Debden, Duxford, Hornchurch and North Weald, with each field being hit multiple times throughout the week, and yet 11 Group fought tooth and nail, intercepting every single incoming attack. Though attrition was starting to show, between aircraft shot down and those destroyed on the ground, RAF losses actually started approaching 1-to-1 with the Luftwaffe. The situation at a glance looked bleak. The key difference was, though, their pilots could bail out and get a new plane. The Germans could not. One RAF pilot bailed out 5 times over the course of the whole battle and got a new aircraft every single time without suffering a scratch on his body. The Germans, meanwhile, suffered heavy attrition in these efforts, losing 100 aircraft with their crews in just a matter of days. When their recon aircraft finally able to operate as Fighter Command was busy dealing with their bombers, the photos they got back revealed a horrible truth. RAF damage control teams had been active across the entire course of the battle. Despite the damage to airbase facilities like hangars and buildings, the runways and fields were filled in, sandbag revetments constructed for the aircraft. The sector control stations vital to the air defense network were reinforced in bunkers or relocated to less conspicuous locations. Throughout all their efforts, only one base, Biggin Hill, had been consistently out of action, and even then, only in several hour intervals. Everywhere else had simply fixed the airfield and kept working. Even so, Beppo Schmidt, in his infinite intellect, insisted that Fighter Command was on the edge of breaking. But as the German aviators looked at the empty seats in their mess, steadily growing in number, doubt had begun to set in. Had they failed? Had the great Luftwaffe finally been defeated? Unfortunately, it didn't matter. It was too late to stop now. As a flight of HE-111s took off for a night raid looking for an industrial target, exhausted after endless operations, they ended up making a devastating navigational error. Bombs fell on London, killing civilians. And though the RAF had been consistently raiding Germany, in response to this attack, Churchill ordered a maximum effort on Berlin in retaliation. The consequences of this would be dire. As for me, though, I had to make a decision. I had been following the Air Force First strategy from day one. I have been husbanding my resources far more carefully than our historical counterparts, and I knew that Day 12 would be crucial. The past few days have been a struggle. Losses have mounted, but with air superiority at level 7, I had to make the decision. Was it time to roll the dice? The RAF are on the edge. Is it time to take the risk? If I go all in too early, I could lose 100 aircraft like my historical counterparts and reset the air superiority back down. However, if I wait too long, the RAF's production and repair rates will ramp back up and more forces will come online, and we will have to fight the battle into late September, losing our sudden death window. It's a tough choice. A gamble, even. But it's a gamble we're going to have to take. Today is Gotterdammerung. Alea iacta est. The die.
Yeah, Dr. Me, like I said,
cast.
it gets weird, but it's happening.
Today there would be no fighter sweeps. Today there would be no recon. No night raids, no nothing. There would only be one mission type today. Full-scale, maximum effort strikes against Fighter Command airfields, and not just any fields. Today we are running the gauntlet. Deep Strike. All the sector airfields I haven't hit subsequently. Fillerton in Bristol, Northolt, North Weald, Debden, Hornchurch, but today is different for two other reasons. The first is that we are finally launching full-scale daytime attacks on the Midlands. My Ju-88 squadrons are fulfilling that mission. They have the best survivability and the best bombing accuracy. And they'll need it, because they are going in without fighter escorts. I'm gambling that I've inflicted enough damage to Fighter Command that they can survive. The other major difference is this. Every single raid today will be done at the optimal bombing height, 7,000 feet. Just high enough to avoid barrage balloons and 40mm Bofors fire, which is the deadliest AA system they have available, while still being low enough to ensure the best bombing accuracy. However, that does come with a trade-off. At 7,000 feet, Fighter Command will have tactical superiority not only over our bombers, but over our high escort fighters as well. That said, I have delayed sweeps behind the formations to escort them on the way back and jump the interceptors. The raids are across 3 waves. The first wave starts early. All of our Stukas are going to hit the coastal airfields in the far west near Plymouth. Maximum effort. The increased radio activity will trick the RAF into scrambling for a patrol, only for no bombers to come across the channel near Calais. Then, an hour and a half later, our second wave starts towards Fighter Command sector airfields all across southeastern England and the Midlands. And the raids don't stop until the end of the day. This is it. Alla Adler, Angriff. The day started well. 7 Stukas died, 11 group came up, and just as they landed, the first wave arrived. Progress was swift. The Midlands raids came in next, and I couldn't believe it. They went largely unopposed. It appeared my gamble had paid off. But then I realized I had spoken too soon.
Uh-oh.
The final wave of the day rolled in, and Fighter Command was there to meet me. The dogfight to end all dogfights broke out, and my bombers started falling like flies. And it was then something else occurred to me. Something absolutely horrible. I had forgotten to augment my flight paths to account for their anti-aircraft net.
Oh, no.
Oh, God. During the battle, the RAF, seeing my attacks on the northern fighter bases, had placed a wall of heavy AA across both sides of the Thames estuary, and my bomber fleets were flying directly over it.
Yikes.
We got through the barrage, but it was costly. The bomb run crippled the enemy airfields. Air superiority rose to level 8. That was it. That was the threshold. I'd reached it. I could win. But that score resets at the end of the day. My plane still had to get home safely. And it was a bloodbath. Bombers started falling like flies. The flak intensified, now knowing their flight path. Our losses climbed and climbed, with very little done to the RAF. We had taken losses at 4-1. It then rose to 5-1. Damaged aircraft kept falling into the channel on their way back. I resigned myself. We were going into September. My gamble had failed. Industrial targets would need to be selected for bombing. A tactical rethink and leadership adjustment would also be required. But then...
Oh?
That's not a good day. That's a bad...
Wait.
No
Wait.
shot!
He did it!
No shot!
What the fuck?
I had done it. The air superiority score
Wow.
hadn't gone down. I had reached level 8 air superiority in under 2 weeks. I had achieved sudden death. And when I went to view the RAF screen, it turned out that I had been a lot more lethal towards their pilots than I'd thought. Readiness rates were through the floor. Their aircraft stockpile was starting to run low, and daily production could not keep up. The pilot's fatigue level had all been at maximum value. Some way, somehow, I had done it. Operation Channel Storm was a success. Historically, though, we know what happened instead.
Yep.
After the bombing of Berlin, Hitler held a speech at the Sportspalast proclaiming death and destruction would rain down upon England's cities. Goering, having been chastised by his Führer, boarded his train America and headed to Calais to oversee the obliteration of London personally. This change in targets forced the Luftwaffe, already exhausted, to fly at the Bf-109's maximum range against the most heavily defended target in Britain, while relieving pressure on the RAF after what had been the deadliest 3 days during the battle. At the crucial moment, after finally working out some sort of plan, they were forced to change strategy. And this time the RAF knew exactly where the Germans were going. They knew exactly how short of fuel they would be, and they knew their bombs would hit nothing even closely related to enabling Operation Sea Lion. From September 6th to September 15th, the Germans launched raid after raid both night and day against London and other major urban centres. The RAF in response regrouped, rearmed, and the big wings pioneered by Lee Mallory and Douglas Bader, which for the majority of the battle had been entirely useless because they took way too long to form up, finally had the time and forewarning to actually form up and engage the Germans en masse. The largest raid on September 15th was a maximum effort from the Luftwaffe. Everyone was up. Today was going to be their knockout blow. Only instead, they found every RAF fighter in 11 and 12 group coming to meet them head on.
Yep, and then they got their
Winston
shit
Churchill,
kicked in.
having come to the operations room to see Keith Park on that day of all days, noticed that all the squadron boards were lit up. He asked Keith Park, "How much do we have in reserves?" Park gave a singular direct answer. None. All of Fighter Command was in the field. The decisive battle had finally come. But for the Luftwaffe, it was nothing but carnage. The bomber crews were horrified as when they lined up on their targets, they saw groups of 50 Spitfires and Hurricanes blazing their guns in head-on passes straight through their formations. The 109s on the edge of their fuel range were helpless to assist, and they were forced to break away, many of which crashed in the Channel or on the French coast, having run out of fuel, including one young pilot by the name of Hans-Joachim Marseille. By the end of the day, despite Beppo Schmidt's insistence that it was a last gasp, everyone in the Luftwaffe knew they'd failed. Adolf Hitler's invincible campaign across Western Europe was finally at an end.
Stopped at the
Operation
channel.
Sea Lion was suspended indefinitely, and planning in earnest began on both their backup plan and their ultimate objective. If Britain could not be defeated outright, then we must settle in for the long war, which, due to our lack of resources, food and manpower, gives us only one option. We must march to the east. The mythology of this moment has been preserved ever since. September 15th is remembered as Battle of Britain Day, which was supposed to be the day this video came out, but you know, stuff happened in Eastern Europe. Again. However, the movie and the history books always talk about plucky little Britain standing up to the Nazi juggernaut. What I hope I got across in this video is the reality that at no point was Britain really under serious threat of defeat.
Yeah.
Production and repair efforts combined with accelerated training, and I cannot stress this enough, the outstanding contribution of Allied pilots like the Polish 303 Squadron along with their colleagues in 310 Squadron from Czechia. Fighter Command was larger at the end of the battle.
And the Canadians and the Americans. Yep, they were all
Furthermore,
there.
the ground crews,
It
radar
took a lot.
operators, engineers,
It
sector
took all of
controllers,
us.
and all the other support branches in the RAF, many of whom I am proud to say were my relatives, were able to repair their facilities and maintain operations continuously throughout the entire battle. Only one base, Biggin Hill, was down for any length of time, and that length of time was measured in hours. And this isn't just a retroactive analysis or 2020 hindsight. Keith Park himself wrote in his report on the battle that the Luftwaffe achieved, quote, very little to diminish Fighter Command's ability to fight. By contrast, the Luftwaffe had lost over 1,000 aircraft, along with 2/3 of the crews. Their men were absolutely exhausted. The German war economy had yet to adjust to the intensity of the conflict, as the Nazis had very intentionally kept things as normal as possible to prevent war weariness and reduce strain on their already overtuned economy, as well as their propaganda effort. Meaning new aircraft and spare parts were arriving at a quarter of the rate of the RAFs. They'd also intentionally front-loaded their military on the understanding that their elite, well-trained and experienced men would win the war quickly before they'd need to start a massive new training program for replacements. With manpower after World War I, they simply did not have. So the entire Channel front were begging for new personnel to cover their losses they just couldn't afford. From their intelligence, to their planning, to their war economy, to their command and control, and all their operational decisions, the Luftwaffe had lost the battle before it had even started. One might even go so far as to say, they tried so hard and got so far, but in the end,
Really?
it didn't even matter. So that's it. That's how the Germans lost the Battle of Britain, and how I went about winning it. We've reached the end of the story, or at least it would be the end. But remember, we have one more mission on our checklist. Great Yarmouth must burn.
Oh my god! Jesus!
There. Finally. Job done. Victory is ours. Now our invasion can finally begin. Hop in, lads. We march against England.
Fuck.
Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh. Well, that was interesting. Yoink, yoink, yoink. And into my cozy apartment. There we go. Oh my god. Okay, so that was fun. Bruh. What is it with Great Yarmouth? I'm pretty sure Pig's not happy either. Oh boy. Oh, well. This was definitely fun to get back to. I hope to do some more history videos another time soon, and hopefully Cry will join me for those later ones. But yeah, now it's time for me to get off, go get some foods, and see what else I can get into tonight. But yeah, thank you all for watching. This was a whole lot of fun. Like I said, please be sure to like and subscribe my channel, so that way and make sure to turn on notifications so you know when I stream. Like here on my YouTube channel, or I upload some new videos. And also, like I said, I encourage you to please send some donations Ven's way. You can put it down in the GoFundMe link is down below in the description. Believe me, anything would help, and I really want to try and help out my girlfriend as much as I can. So that would be appreciated. Thank you very much. And yeah, we'll see you guys all in the next video. So as always, you know who I am. I know who you are. I'll see you all in the next video.